Toomas, kuule, ma olen kaua mõelnud, milline on üks ideaalne juriidiliselt pädev vägistamise ohver? Räägi mulle natuke.
See on keeruline küsimus selles mõttes, et paraku tavaliselt ohvrid ei oma juriidilisi eriteadmisi.
No aga oletame, et me üritame treenida kõik oma noored naised pädevateks ohvriteks.
Loodetavasti ei ole seda vaja.
Ma tahaks ka loota.
Aga ideaalses maailmas võiks ju olla nii, et kannatanu ei vaja juriidilisi eriteadmisi. Selleks on riiklik süüdistus, ehk siis prokurör, ehk selline empaatiline, professionaalne prokurör suudaks ju väga edukalt kannatanud kohtus esindada. Paraku me ei ela ideaalses maailmas.
Ja.
Kui me ei ela ideaalses maailmas, siis ma loodan, et tulevik on selles, et ohver saab riigi poolt määratud õigusabi.
Tervist, proua Marina! Olge nii kena ja rääkige meile, kui teie juurde tuleb üks seksuaalvägivalla ohver, mis me ütleme nii, vägistamise ohver, siis mis on tähtis?
Tähtis on tegeleda kohe. Ja. Et me loomulikult püüame võtta ta kohe kabineti sisse. Ämmemand enda poolt nagu räägib, pakub nii öelda esimest nagu nõustamist ja toetamist ja võtame ta arvuti sisse ja räägime nii kaua, kui arst on tulemas, et räägime, mida me siis saame tema abiks nagu pakkuda. Et meil on esimesed lehed, mida ta näeb, on nõusolekuleht. Sest siin on kirjas, mida me käime üksi niimoodi, ükshaaval, mida me siin teeme. Ja siis pöördunu paneb oma jah või ei sõna.
Mida tähendab tema jah või ei sõna? Et kas ta tahab edasi minna selle asjaga või ei taha?
Et just konkreetse näiteks kogu keha, seal hulgas suguelundite läbivaatusega, jah, olen nõus, ei, ma ei ole nõus. Et seda kehaosa vaadatakse või üldse minu keha nagu vaadatakse ja nii edasi, et siis on analüüsid, tõendmateriaal, vere uriiniproovi ehk toksikoloogia, pildistamine ja üldse nagu teabe edastamine, et teatud spetsialistidele ja siis ka politsei.
Selge.
Ja. Et loomulikult...
Aga kas ta saab keelduda ka osade kaupa, et ta näiteks ütleb, et ma politseid ei taha praegu teavitada?
Et kui need kõik vigastuste kirjeldused lähevad kirja, et siis ka kehakaardidele.
Kui vigastusi on?
Kui vigastusi on, siis on nagu märgistused tehtud ja nendele toeks on, kui oli luba olemas, pildid ka. Ja, aga meil on universaalne protokoll, et meessosohtrid ka pöörduvad, et meil on siis need kehakaardide pildid siin nii-öelda mõlema soo omad. Paralleelselt loomulikult käib ka tõendmaterialide kogunemine, et siis on meil selline kitikast, on siin palju vahendeid. Et tema on pakendatud nii-öelda, et omaenda kitt ei ole päris stiilse keskkonda, aga et need aluspaberid on kindlasti steriilsed. Siin on kõik vajalik läbivaatuseks olemas. Et tubepeegel, et kindlasti kasutame ka, et tegijate DNA ei satuks sinna proovidele, et katame nagu juuksed. Põhiline on see, millega me kogume, et kui on vaja võtta, et siis me teeme niiskeks, need vatipulgakesi on siin mitu. Et me räägime alati üle. Mida me teeme?
Mida teete, kust te võtate selle proovi?
Kogu protsessi käigus, mis me teeme, räägime üle. Ja siin on üks väga selline oluline koht, et alati pöördunu saab öelda, palun, stopp.
Jah, et enam ma ei taha.
Et kas teeme pausi või ma enam üldse ei taha. Et loomulikult see tuleb arvesse võtta, me seda teeme. Aga ma näitan, et siin ei maksa karta, seda me räägime ka nendele, et proovide võtmine ei ole valus, et need pulgakesed, millega me materjali kogume, on sellised peenikesed, et tõesti see ei tee haiget. Et kui on proov võetud, siis me pakendame kõik need proovid eraldi, me voldime kokku need karbikesed ja siis, kui proov on võetud, see jääbki siia sisse. Niimoodi paneme vahele, aga enne ta läheb ka klaasi peale. Ja. Niimoodi paneme ka. Ja kindlasti, nagu see oli teile näidatud, et umbes nii see näeb välja, et siin me paneme märki, kust see proov on võetud ja seesama number läheb kirja karbikese peale. Siis, kui on kõik võetud, pakendame kitti nagu sisse, pakendame teibiga asitõend kitti kinni ja siis ta jääb ootama, kuni politsei seda nagu taotleb.
Selge, ta jääb siia haiglasse, ta ei lähe automaatselt mitte kuhugile.
Ja, ta jääb hoiule.
Patsient saab alati öelda, et
kui ta pöördub, kui ta on juba pöördunud, politsei menetluse käigus taotleb seda kitti ja saab.
Toomas, see tundus mulle nagu kohtumeditsiinilabor.
Eks ta ju seda ka on, et ka vägistamisjuhtumite puhul on äärmiselt tähtis aeg. Ehk siis kiire pöördumine meditsiiniasutusse, läbivaatus ja tõendite kogumine. See konkreetne karbikene on määranud mitmete vägistajate saatuse. See on väga tänuväärne, mis te teete.
Väga palju tööd, aga kui see on tehtud õigesti, siis on see adekvaatne tõendusmaterjal,
mida saab
kohtus kasutada.
No, rääkimata sellest, et ohver siin esimest korda saab ka tuge.
Ja psühholoogilist abi ja tuge.
Aga ma siis lisaks natuke selle aja kriitilisuse nagu juttu, et siin on nagu näha hästi oluline toksikoloogia, et me võtame vere ja uriini just ka nagu EKI pärast analüüsib, et kui politsei taotleb, võtab seda kaasa, et see alati on võetud enne, kui me kõike hakkame tegema, kuna see kriitilisus on just kehas ja veres ja uriinis on väga-väga oluline.
Joogid lähevad kiiresti ära.
Ja, väga ruttu. Ja kõik muud ained ka on tabatavad ka ikkagi ka hästi ruttu peame saama.
Aitäh selle põhjaliku sissevaate eest ja aitäh muidugi selle tänuväärse töö eest, mida te teete. Aitäh, Marina.
Aitäh teile ka.
Tervist veel kord. Et väga muljetavaldav sissejuhatus. Mina ei ole tänase päeva moderaator, nii et seda ei tasu minult oodata. Minu nimi on Taavi Linnamäe ja mina olen president Kaljulaidi fondi tegevjuht. President Kaljulaidi fond on siis selle tänase kohtumise kokku kutsunud ja mul on väga hea meel näha, et see saal on enam-vähem nii täis, kui ta üldse siin olla saab. Nii et juba see iseenesest näitab, et teema kõnetab ja läheb korda ja mitte ainult väga kitsale ringile, vaid kui ma natukene vaatan ja näen neid tuttavaid ja väga palju võõraid, aga ka üksjagu tuttavaid nägusid, siis siin on inimesi üsna erinevatelt elualadelt ja mul on selle üle hea meel. Palavad tervitused saadab ka president Kaljulaid, kes praegu oli meiega siin videoteel, hetkel on ta kuskil õhuruumis teel Ameerikast siia poole ja ma arvan, et juba üsna varsti peaksid rattad puutuma maha ja ühineb ta meiega siin ka füüsiliselt. Ja eks ta saab siis avada enda vaadet kogu sellele temaatikale. President Kaljulaidi fondi üks missioone on algusest peale olnud ühiskonna nõrgemate gruppide toetamine või siis vähemasti nii-öelda prožektori suunamine, nii nagu president Kaljulaid Kadrioru aegadel defineeris vabariigi presidendi rolli, et see on suunata prožektorit nendesse pimenurkadesse, mis võib-olla on meie ühiskonnas välja valgustamata. Nii oleme püüdnud seda tööd jätkata ka president Kaljulaidi fondis ja valgustada välja ja tuua valguse kätte neid kohti, neid diskussioonikohti ka, mida me võib-olla ühiskonnas ei ole tahtnud või ei ole osanud piisavalt hästi arutada. Ja kui ma ütlesin, et ühiskonna nõrgemate gruppide, siis mul on alati selle koha peal dilemma, et ma tegelikult ka antud juhul vägivalla ohvritest rääkides ei taha tegelikult öelda, et nad on nõrgemad. Mulle tihtipeale tundub, et nad on hoopis väga palju tugevamad. Aga lõpuks tänase arutelu kontekstis isegi vahet ei ole. Et tänase arutelu kontekstis on võib-olla oluline see, et see nurk iseenesest on meie ühiskonnas pime, hämar või vähemasti mitte väga hästi valgustatud ja ma loodan, et tänane arutelu toob siia natukene valgust juurde. Et ma arvan, et see ongi meie ühiskonnas olnud probleem, et me ei oska tegelikult sellistel keerulistel teemadel väga hästi rääkida. Et vägivalla teemad, vägistamise teemad, üldse seksuaalsuse teemad laiemalt, seksuaalvägivalla teemad sinna juurde. Et ega meil on natukene ebamugav ja ma ei tea, kultuuriline ühiskondlik eripära, et vanema põlvkonna inimesed ei ole koolis sellest rääkinud ja on nagu keeruline kuidagi argumenteeritult seda arutelu pidada. Ja meie eesmärk oligi siis tegelikult kutsuda kokku need inimesed, kellel see teema korda läheb ja proovida seda diskussiooni vedada ja tuua siia diskussiooni juurde ka rohkem argumente. Et sellest kas ma pean oma naiselt ka küsima, sellest diskussioonist tegelikult jõuda natuke rohkem sinna diskussiooni, et me arutame jah üle või ei mudeli üle. Ma usun, et teist kedagi ei pea selles veenma, aga meil on ka jälgijad Delfis, meil on tegelikult palju suurem auditoorium ja ma arvan, et seda ühiskondlikku diskussiooni rikastada on meie selle ürituse üks missioon. Mul on hea meel, et me ei pea arutama selle üle, et kas me üldse peame selle teema üle arutama. Et kui Eesti võttis vastu või ratifitseeris Istanbuli konventsiooni, siis sai see teema meile päris omaks nagunii. Juba eelmises koalitsioonileppes oli see teema tegelikult sees koos kokkuleppega, et võetakse nõusolekuseadus vastu. Ja ma arvan, et selles osas oleme me ühest kännust üle saanud, aga nüüd on vaja kokku leppida ühiskonnas, et milline täpselt on see mudel, millise me vastu võtame. Täna selle üle saabki arutada. Ja siin on erinevate riikide eksperte, asjaosalisi, kes on selle protsessi juures olnud teistes riikides. Nii et ma usun, et saame üksjagu arutelumaterjale, erinevaid vaatenurki selle kohta, kuidas ühiskonnas see diskussioon pidada, kuidas seda on teistes kohtades peetud ja kuhu see välja jõudnud on. Selle kõige juures on minu jaoks võib-olla kõige olulisem see, et kuigi koalitsioonileppes on kokku lepitud seaduse vastuvõtmine ja ka täna on siin poliitikud, kes otseselt vastutavad selle eest või kaudsemalt vastutavad selle eest ja veavad, siis me tegelikult ei räägi ju seaduse muudatusest. Jah, seaduse muudatus on see vorm, aga me tegelikult räägime sellest, et meie eesmärk on ühiskondlikke hoiakuid teadlikult muuta ja suunata. Ja ma arvan, et see on asi, mis kogu aeg peab meil kuklas olema ja miks ma arvan, on meie kõigi huvi seda diskussiooni tegelikult vedada laiemaks, mitte ainult pidada kitsas spetsialistide ringis. Nii, aga sellega mina lõpetan. Tervitan veel kord teid president Kaljulaidi fondi poolt. Varsti on Kersti ka siin ja ma ei tea, viljakaid arutelusid. Nüüd tuleb lavale päris moderaator natuke longates, aga selle eest väga vapralt.
Mul on mikrofon olemas. Aitäh, Taavi. Tere.
Jõudu aruteludeks.
Natuke longatas jah, aga õnneks mu verbaalne võimekus on sellest sõltumata säilinud. Tere kõigile. Mina olen Annika Arras Miltonist ja olen teile siis tänase Nõusolekuseaduse foorumil arutelukaaslaseks ja moderaatoriks. Ma siiralt ja südamest loodan, et tänase foorumiga saab alguse oluline ühiskondlik arutelu. See on tegelikult meil seni pidamata, nagu Taavi juba ka viitas, et üle 100-aastase piisavalt küpse riigina ma usun, et me oleme valmis sellest rääkima. Ja sellest ei ole kerge rääkida ja üldse mitte lihtne. Aga rääkida tuleb. Täna on Eestis tahtevastane vahekord legaalne teatud juhtudel. Sellisena välja öeldult tundub see täiesti absurdsena. Elame ju ometigi õigusriigis ja kuritööd peaksid saama karistatud. Kõik kuritööd, ideaalis. Aga seksuaalvägivalla ohvrite puhul see täna paraku nii ei ole. Seaduse käsitlus ei toeta täna ohvrit ja seetõttu ei jõua paljud süüteod isegi mitte kohtusse. süüdlased ei saagi karistatud. Ja kui siis jõuabki kohtuni, on ohvrite kohtlemine kaugel väärikusest, millega trauma läbinud inimesi kohelda tuleks. Praegune vägistamisdefinitsioon jaotab moraalse vastutuse seksuaalvägivalla eest ohvri ja vägistaja vahel, ehkki ohver pole kunagi süüdi. Ohver peab vastu hakkama või põhjendama, miks ta ei suutnud vastu hakata. Ja kohus hindab, kas ta ikkagi tegi seda piisavalt arusaadavalt või kas ta oli piisavalt abitu seda mitte tegema. Tänane süsteem taas ohvristab kannatanut. Kui me räägime seksuaalvägivalla ohvritest, siis esimese hooga mõtleme ikkagi naiste peale. Ja numbrid seda ka kinnitavad. Enamjaolt ongi ohvrid naised, aga siiski mitte ainult. Ohver on ohver, olenemata tema soost. Ega ka vanusest, rahvusest, usust, kooselustaatusest või seksuaalsest sättumusest. Seksuaalne vägivald pole mitte kunagi õigustatud mitte kellegi suhtes ja iga ohver vajab kaitset. Seetõttu Eesti vajabki ühiskondlikku kokkulepet, mis ütleb selgelt ja üheselt, et suguühe ilma nõusolekuta on vägistamine. Ja see kokkulepe vajabki seadusraami, mida me nimetame nõusolekuseaduseks, mis, nagu me juba eelnevalt kuulsime, omab erinevaid lähenemisviise. On jah-mudel ja on ei-mudel. Jah-mudeli puhul tuleb seksuaalse tegevuse osalistel väljendada oma nõusolekut seksiks ning seda saab teha kas sõnaliselt, kehakeeles või muul viisil, aga see peab olema selgelt väljendatud. Ja jah-mudel on tänaseks käibel ka enamikes Euroopa riikides, kuigi mitte kõigis. Ja selle mudeli juhtmõtteks on vaikimine, pole kunagi nõusolek. Ei-mudeli puhul tuleb seksuaalse tegevuse osalistel väljendada selle tegevuse osas oma tahtevastasust, ehk tuleb väljendada selgelt ei. Ka see mudel on mitmes riigis kasutusel, aga siiski vähem. Selle mudeli juhtmõte on vaikimine on nõusolek. Mina isiklikult selle versiooniga kuidagi nõustuda ei taha. Sestap Eestis üleminek ei-mudelilt ja jah-mudelile võimaldakski seksuaalvägivalla kuritegusid senisest efektiivsemalt menetleda, ohvrid päriselt kaitsta ja toimepanijaid süüdi mõista. Täna me siis kuulemegi erinevatelt kõnelejatelt nii ei- kui jah-mudeli kogemust ja proovime kaasa võtta selle, mis aitaks siis seda sama arutelu siin Eestis arendada, et me jõuame endale sobiva lahenduseni. Foorumi alguses te nägite videos arutlemas president Kersti Kaljulaid, endisprokuröri Toomas Liivat ja Lääne-Tallinna Keskhaigla vastuvõtuosakonna ämmaemandusjuhti Marina Siidorovat. Nad olid Pelgulinna sünnitusmaja vastuvõtukabinetis, kus ohvreid igapäevaselt üle vaadataksegi, täpselt selles ruumis, mida te nägite. Muide, samas ruumis võetakse vastu ka sünnitajaid. Ja sellest majast me kuulame tänase päeva jooksul vestlusi veel erinevate inimestega, et laiendada arusaama ohvri teekonnast. Peale igat ettekannet võtan küsimusi ka, nii et head saalis olijad, kui te tahate küsida, siis me teeme seda vanal heal klassikalisel moel käsi püsti, keegi toob teile mikrofoni ja siis saate sõna. Kui keegi ei saa aru osadest ettekannetest, sest need on inglise keeles, siis teil on võimalus endale võtta sealt poolt kõrvaklapid, kust kuuleb tõlget. Ja sellest tulenevalt me peatselt nüüd liigume üle inglise keelele. Kui vähegi võimalik, siis ma teen tutvustused eesti keeles, aga kuna ettekanded ja arutelud on inglise keeles, siis küsimuste voor toimub ka inglise keeles. Ma soovin teile hoolikat kuulamist, kohe väga hoolikat kuulamist, empaatiat ja mõtteavardust tänasesse päeva. Ja nüüd ma kutsun lavale professor Dr. Bettina Weiseri. Tema on Kölni ülikooli välis- ja rahvusvahelise kriminaalõiguse instituudi direktor, silmapaistev ekspert kriminaalõiguse ja rahvusvahelise kriminaalõiguse vallas. Ta on olnud mitmete oluliste rahvusvaheliste juriidiliste dokumentide koostamise töögrupi liige, nagu näiteks ÜRO rahvusvahelise organiseeritud kuritegevuse vastane konventsioon. Ja ta tuleb, räägib meile Saksamaa kogemusest nõusolekuseadusega. Please, Bettina, stage is yours and please share Germany's experience with the no means no model, as they call it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for the very kind introduction. Thank you also for inviting me here. It's my first time in Estonia, and I can tell you I have already fallen in love with Tallinn city yesterday evening, so make sure you get rid of me tonight again. In what follows, I will first give you a very brief sketch of the German criminal law's path to date. I will then outline the reasoning behind this development, and I will end with a few concluding observations. In German criminal law, sexual acts used to be a crime if they were carried out against the victim's will and with the use of violence or threats of violence, or by taking advantage of the victim's vulnerable situation. So the core element of a punishable sexual assault used to be the exercise of coercion by the perpetrator to overcome the victim's unwillingness. And from what I've understood, the Estonian criminal law follows this coercion-based approach too. Then, in November 2016, the German legislator abandoned this coercion-based approach and instead established a consent-based approach. In principle, a consent-based model of defining sexual assault can be construed in two different manners. They are declared as no means no versus only yes means yes models. The difference between the two models becomes clear in ambiguous situations, and that is if one partner remains silent and passive. A no means no approach would expect the silent partner to actively communicate his or her adverse will. Hence, the law entails an obligation for the victim to make clear that he or she is unwilling to engage in sexual activities. If no is communicated clearly, any further sexual activity is a punishable sexual assault. A model based on the yes means yes approach, on the other hand, renders sexual activities legal only if both participants have explicitly agreed on them beforehand. Therefore, in ambiguous situations with one silent and passive person, the other one, the active person, is obliged to ask about consent. If affirmative consent then is not communicated, any further sexual activity is illegal. The current state of the German criminal law entails both approaches. The general offense description of sexual assault in section 177 subsection 1 of the Criminal Code follows the no means no approach and requires that the victim's opposing will is discernible. Hence, the victim is required by law to unambiguously communicate their opposing will. The yes means yes approach is integrated in the law only in the one case that one of the partners suffers from a significant cognitive impairment or another physical or mental condition that prevents them from expressing their will in a legally binding way. Now, since the legislator wanted to avoid that this group of persons is completely excluded from any consensual sexual experience, the law allows sexual activities if the partner who is less impaired ensures that the other one, the impaired person's factual consent is present. This is the only case in which the German criminal law reflects the yes means yes approach. So far, the current state of the law. Now, why did the legislator decide to so profoundly change the law? I would name 3 reasons. First, the former law entailed loopholes regarding the criminalization of unwanted sexual acts. Since the former provision required an element of coercion, the case in which the victim just said no without performing any physical resistance would not be covered by sexual assault. So these cases are now covered by the general offense description under the no means no approach. Also, the law criminalizes sexual acts in a situation in which the perpetrator makes use of the fact that the victim is not able to form or to express a contrary will. That is, the victim is drunk, the victim is unconscious, or the victim is literally frozen in shock. Furthermore, surprise attacks were not covered by the former law, since they do not entail an element of coercion. This loophole is also remedied by a new provision. And finally, situations in which the victim was implicitly threatened, for example, by a climate of violence in a lasting relationship, and therefore did not dare to resist, were also not covered by the former law, since the perpetrator did not use any actual violence in the situation. Further cases of threat, including those of a non-physical nature, were also not covered by the former law. Both these shortcomings are now remedied by the new provision in section 177, subsection 2. The second reason behind the law reform was the legislator's goal to ensure that German criminal law is in line with the Istanbul Convention. The convention requires the member states to criminalize non-consensual conduct irrespective of any violence to overbear the victim's opposing will. Again, this requirement of the convention is reflected in the general offense description of assault in section 177. The third reason for the law reform were the events of New Year's Eve 2015 in Cologne. A huge crowd of young men, mostly of North African and Arab origin, gathered on the square in front of the cathedral, and groups within the larger group attacked passing females. The pictures in the media caused huge public outrage, and suddenly former political opponents joined forces behind the no means no model, all of them emphasizing their commitment to protecting women's sexual self-determination and freedom. And almost overnight, a long-lasting debate on law reform came to an end, and the no means no model was introduced. Now, what can we conclude from all of this? In any event, we have seen that the former loopholes of criminal liability for unwanted sexual acts are closed by the current law. Also, the German criminal law can be interpreted as being in line with the Istanbul Convention. Although some authors contend that the Convention's requirements on defining sexual assault reflect a yes means yes approach, the explanatory notes explicitly leave it to the member states' legislators to decide on the exact wording of the offense criminalizing sexual assault. And also the State Report on Germany did not criticize the general approach of the German criminal law in defining sexual assault. So we can conclude from this that the German solution is in line with the Convention. The most crucial question, however, is whether the law has enhanced the protection of sexual autonomy. I have 3 thoughts on this. First, from a policy point of view, I would contend that it is, of course, a big step forward to abandon a coercion-based approach and instead establish a consent-based approach. However, second, we have not seen a significant increase in the number of convictions under the new Section 177 since 2016. A very, very optimistic interpretation of this would be that the whole debate on the no means no approach might have heightened the awareness of the need to ensure consent before engaging in sexual activity. Another optimistic conclusion would be that especially women are more inclined to speak up and reject unwanted sexual acts. But, and this is my third conclusion, a less optimistic way of interpreting the numbers would be to relate to the threefold fact that, first, cases of sexual assault used to be and continue to be underreported, which is, second, due to potential complainants knowing that the standards of proof are often not met. Because in most of the cases, the only witness is at the same time the victim. And finally, third, judicial practice tends to a very offender-friendly interpretation of the facts and the law. This is particularly true if the suspect claims to have been mistaken about the victim's opposing will. Then intent is negated and there is no sexual assault, no matter how obvious the victim's opposing will may have been. The decisive factor in this respect is how the court arrives at its assessment of the relevant facts of the case. There is no evidentiary rule requiring the court to believe in every excuse put forward by the suspect, no matter how contrary to common sense it is. Ultimately, an effective protection of sexual autonomy thus depends on how the law is applied in practice. And I firmly believe that in this regards, things will change significantly, as we will soon see a young female majority on German judges' benches. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bettina, very much. I'm not going to take questions now as you're going to be part of the next discussion, so then I will take the questions to Bettina as well in the end of the discussion. Please stay on stage. Ja järgmiseks arutame ja proovime õppida teistelt, ehk et lisaks Saksamaa kogemusele kuuleme ka Taani ja Soome kogemusteks. Ja lavale tulevad veel Helle Hald, kes on Taani advokaat ja oma töös peamiselt pühendunud just ohvrite õiguste esindamisele. Tal on rohkem kui 25-aastane kogemus oma klientide kohtus esindamisel. Ja lisaks tuleb ka siis Soomest Turu ülikooli õigusteaduste abiprofessor Daniela Alatinolu ja tema uurimisvaldkondadeks on läbi aastate olnud soolisuse küsimus õiguses, kriminaalõigus ning inimõigused laiemalt. Ja ta on jälginud teadlasena ka nõusolekuseaduse vastuvõtmisi laiemalt siis Põhjamaades erinevates riikides ning ta on kirjutanud ka sel teemal mitmeid artikleid ja vedanud arutelusid. Vestlust tuleb modereerima Eliise Rohtmets, kes on filosoofia lektor ja huvikaitse feministeeriumist. Tema on viimase 2 aasta jooksul oma huvikaitsetöös just nimelt keskendunud seksuaalse nõusoleku teemade uurimisele ja samuti Eesti õigusliku regulatsiooni nügimisele nõusoleku põhisuse poole. Please, Hele, Daniela, Elise, stage is yours together with Bettina.
Good afternoon. The first panel of the forum will revolve around some of the legal questions, the most pressing legal questions that have come up during the discussion over the consent law. We'll have 20 minutes for the discussion with the panelists, and then 10 minutes for questions from the audience. I wholeheartedly encourage the audience to ask any questions they might have in mind. Since Bettina gave a really good talk on the German legislation and her ideas on the conclusions whether sexual autonomy has gained, the protection of sexual autonomy has gained from these changes, I'm going to now ask Helle and Daniela the same question, that how has your country adopted your consent law and what led to that decision? I think we'll start with Helle.
Yeah, I'll try to make it short, but I'm a lawyer. I could talk for several minutes and hours about this, especially this topic, since I have been working as a victim lawyer for many years. So in Denmark, we adopted what I would call a consent-based definition of rape in our penal code. It was from January 1st January 2021, and it was not an overnight thing. There has been debate for years about making it better conditions for victims of rape. How does the police handle these cases? How does the prosecutor handle these cases? And especially, how do the courts handle these cases? So it has been like a process, I would actually say, starting in the year of 2000, when we had centers at the hospitals for victims of rape. So I can jump to the conclusion. Our legislation is yes means yes. So the affirmative consent law I agree that that is the best way to do it for several reasons. There was a big discussion of exactly all the same things that Bettina just mentioned. Of course, the Istanbul Convention started everything, that we ratified this, so we needed to change the law. I think everybody agreed to that. A majority of experts in Denmark would think that the no means no model would be sufficient to fulfill our obligations. Maybe it is, but the final decision was a yes means yes model. And I should also say that I think that Amnesty International has been a very big, they really made a big effort in the progress starting in 2018, I would say, until now when we have the new law. Yeah, that was, I think, short.
Thank you. It was, and we will kind of delve into the nuances as well. Daniela.
Yes, so Finland has also adopted a yes means yes model, a consent-based law on sexual offences and particularly rape. In 2022, it is in force since 2023. What was behind this change of the law? So the earlier Finnish law was very similar to the earlier German law. That built on sort of use of violence, threat, or exploitation of a defenseless victim. And there were considered to be several shortcomings in this law. And like Helle also said, in Denmark, in Finland, there had also been decades of discussion and criticism regarding the previous law. Many things happened towards the end of the 2010s. So there was Me Too, there was a citizens' initiative to change the definition of rape to one based on consent and one based on voluntariness. And there was also a move by Germany, also by Sweden, Iceland, so the other Nordic countries, changing their laws. So the time was believed to be the right one also in Finland to change the definition of rape to one that's based on voluntary or involuntary participation.
Thank you. Getting to the different wordings of the law, one question that has come up is that does the yes means yes model provide more protection to the victim? Is there a difference? It's an open question for any of you to start.
I can start, and then the other ones can fill in. There was some discussion also in Finland about whether to adopt a no means no model or a yes means yes model. And I was also involved in some of the processes to establish a rape definition based on voluntariness. And what we saw in the difference between the models is that, of course, a yes means yes model could be considered to be more comprehensive. So some situations, such as the ones mentioned by you in your great presentation, some situations like elements of surprise, these kinds of intimate relations that have violence in them, and also other situations such as when the victim freezes or doesn't act in a way that the law was presuming victims to act. So these situations were considered better covered by a yes means yes model, which was also considered to put the focus and the procedural focus in the trial also more on sort of how did the defendant make sure that the plaintiff actually wanted to engage in sexual intercourse and how what actions were taken by them.
So there's so many things to say about this. So I would start by stressing out that just changing the law is never enough. There's so many things working around the changing of the law. It is to have better information. So let me talk the victim's case now. A lot better information, more guidelines for the police is how to ask the questions and where does the interrogation take place. We have, like in Denmark, we have special rooms. We have education of the police investigators, even education of the prosecutors. We just need to educate the judges some more. But it can never stand alone, just changing the law. So at this point, we are looking into actually some young potential victims actually does know how to say yes. They don't even know how to say no. So there's a big thing. So if you ask the question about does it require more protection of the victims, I would say yes. I would say though also the backside is we probably also need more protection of the perpetrators, because they need to be more awake. They need to be more aware of what is going on. And some might think it's a problem. I think, once again, it's have to educate people more. We have to make it clear who has the responsibility for this not becoming a rape. Is it the victim? That's exactly what Bettina said. Does it actually have some obligations on the victim to say no? No, it's not it. The victim has to say yes. So the obligation to be sure there is a yes is actually on the perpetrator. And we need to learn them how to be aware of that, if it makes sense. It's not so legal what I'm saying. It's more like, I think there's something you need to do as well as just changing the law.
Yeah, is this still working? No? I would say that if the legislator opts for a yes means yes model, his work becomes much easier, because that would be one provision saying if consent is not there, this is a crime. On the other hand, if the legislator opts for no means no, you need more additional provisions for cases in which the victim is either not able to communicate the no, or it's just not reasonable to communicate a no because the situation is already violent, or there are imminent threats or something like that. So the easier way for the legislator is to opt for the yes means yes model. Whether this enhances the protection of sexual autonomy, I'm not sure about that, because in the end, the yes, like the no, can be communicated not only verbally, but also in, gestures and how the victim or the other person behaves. And this boils down to a matter of evidence and how the courts handle it. So in the end, the crucial question is always how the courts handle the evidence, and not so much whether the legislator decides for yes means yes or no means no.
That's why I said we still need to educate the judges. But I don't disagree at all. I think there is a minor difference, and it is about who is the. I think that actually one of your first slides was so good, and it's about who has the responsibility. It should never be the victim, because the thing is, you are saying so true. Sometimes the victim is not able to say no because maybe the victim is overwhelmed. We call it like to freeze, or had too much to drink, whatever. But they're not able to say yes either. So it is a matter of how the courts are taking care of these cases, how much they require for somebody to be convicted, or if it's still the burden of proof is always on the prosecutor, and it's like, well, there's not too much proof. It's two persons, they're both trustworthy, likely trustworthy. It will always be acquittance. That's the way it is. So it's, I think the judges need to look into other things than just who said yes, who said no, which is a thing that we see in Denmark. All text messages, what happened on SoMe, what did you do right before, what did you do right after. So cases most likely to result in somebody found guilty are the cases that has been reported to the police within 3 hours. It has to be extremely fast, because then the police can investigate, and it tells a lot about how the victim actually felt about this, what's going on. So they say 3 hours, it's in a report, it's not something I'm saying. But of course, within 24 hours, it's important. Go to the police straight away.
Thank you. I think this is a good segue to one of the other burning questions that has kind of created contention here, which is that, okay, we have even if we have a yes model, and even if we believe that it might give a better sense of protection to the victims, then there's criticism in Estonia that the yes model will erode the presumption of innocence, and maybe we can kind of discuss this issue. I think in Denmark there was a review recently on how the law has been working for the past 2 years. Was that one of the issues also discussed, or?
Yeah, so there was like a hearing at the government, and I was speaking as, once again, the victim's lawyer. But there seems to be in Denmark. So I would say it's good. I like the interpretation. I don't think that we should change anything, because it takes a while for the entire society, the judges and everything, to adjust to new legislation, and we're not there yet. But in Denmark, there's like a big group of people, defense lawyers and others, now saying it's a big problem. What about all the poor boys? They don't understand what it is to say yes or no. They don't understand what consent is. And we see a large number of defense lawyers accusing the victim, the rape victims, of false accusations. So it's true. We right now have a review of the law. I don't think it will change, but it's always good to have debate about what is going on. I think that what we could conclude on this by the hearing is we still need to educate the young people. That's one thing, and we still need time. It's too early, actually, just to say it doesn't work. And then I still believe so much in authorities. I still believe that a Danish court, which would be 3 judges or 6 judges if it's a high court, they will never convict somebody who is actually innocent. They will always acquit somebody if there is reasonable doubt about whether or not the rapist is actually a rapist, or just, let me just be straight, like a stupid boy who did not actually was aware that maybe she didn't want it. I mean, but he will be acquitted. Does it make sense?
Yes, so I think from the Finnish experience, I can just say that there was some discussion also about the presumption of innocence and how a consent-based or voluntariness-based rape definition would affect the presumption of innocence. But I think this was mainly before there was any actual law draft on the table. Because because in that discussion as well, that was before, there was also this kind of misunderstanding of what a consent-based law actually means. And there was a conflation of the elements of the crime and the standards of evidence. But I think also when Finland saw other countries adopting other legal models for consent-based law and seeing that this doesn't change necessarily so it changes the elements of the crime, but of course the presumption of innocence is still very much valid and constitutionally protected, and protected also by the international conventions that Finland has ratified. And I think in a way, I'm wondering whether this discussion, I think of course the presumption of innocence is crucial in a state that protects the rule of law. And I don't think also that most feminists would like to get rid of the presumption of innocence. But I'm wondering if there isn't also a kind of a willingness to misunderstand what a consent-based law actually means, and to actually take these legal discussions seriously, and maybe refrain from engaging in them by saying that, well, these crazy feminists just want to abolish the presumption of innocence, or these kinds of discussions. But these are, of course, very important discussions to have, but it's important to discuss them with the law drafts at hand, the legal models at hand, and not just based on some vague assumptions of what such a law could be.
Maybe just one very short comment. I would say from a strictly legal point of view, neither the no means no nor the yes means yes model touches the presumption of innocence, not at all, because this is all not related to the model the legislator decides for. So in the end, the crucial step is the step away from the coercion-based model, because that is the model where you can just look at the victim and see the wound or whatever. And as soon as you move away from that, and I'm sure we are all on the same page about this, that this is what needs to be done. If you once decide for a consent-based model, the presumption of innocence has nothing to say about whether you go the yes means yes or the no means no path.
Thank you. And now it's time for questions.
Thank you, and thank you very much for this interesting discussion. Estonia has always leaned very much on the German law in its legislation. Now we have an interesting discussion here, whether if Estonia goes with the consent law, whether to adopt one way like Denmark and Finland, or the other way that has Germany taken. I would like to ask more about that way from Dr. Weisser. Why? What were the arguments why Germany took the line of 9 heißt 9? Why was it better in your discussions, or what were the arguments over yes means yes? Thank you.
So to be honest, there wasn't very much of a discussion about yes means yes or no means no. The discussion was very much about shall we leave the coercion-based model or not? And the argument was very much about the presumption of innocence there. And in that whole debate, almost nobody advocated for the yes means yes model. Especially not when you look at scholars, because the feeling was yes means yes has something about something like a negotiation and like a contract you have to do beforehand, and this is not very much what we think about when we talk about sexual activities. But that's just a feeling. I don't know how to explain this differently. And the other reason would be that the discussion on sexual autonomy in Germany is very much on human dignity. Because one core element of human dignity is autonomy and self-determination. And if you look at it from that point of view, you would always expect the victim to stand up for themselves and say, no, I don't want this. And if you look at it from that point of view, you would, I think, almost automatically lean to a no means no model, because you would expect the victim to communicate clearly, I don't want this. And you would not say the state, it's the task of the state to protect the victim or the person who does not want this, insofar as the criminal law steps in, even if the victim did not make clear that she or he didn't want the sexual activity. So I think that was very much the baseline of the discussion.
I just have one small note, just so that you know, a majority in Denmark actually wanted the no means no. So it was a minority who wanted the other model when there was a big report. But we got the yes means yes because it was more the society. So I think a very big difference is how the police investigate the case. So do they ask the girl, how did you say no? Or do they ask the boy, now I'm assuming it's a boy and a girl, do they ask the boy, how did you make sure she said yes? And I think that's the big question. What kind of society do you want? Who is the one who is to answer the questions? Who is the one who's the closest to actually take responsibility for what is going on?
Hi, thank you so much for a great discussion. I have one question, because one thing that comes up and I think is big problem, apart from the law, is the practice. How you treat victims in courts, the re-traumatization, and I'm wondering how the two models has actually changed, and has it changed at all? Because Bettina very nicely pointed out that we might have new wave of young female judges who will come with different treatments. However, we're not there yet. And I understand from Denmark, there might even have some setbacks. So I'm very curious how the different models have actually changed the course, how we treat victims in the courtrooms. Thank you.
I think I already said that just changing the law is not enough. And in Denmark, we had many changes, even when the consent law was debated. National guidelines for the police, how to investigate the cases, special interrogation rooms, a victim's lawyer who is to be there from the very beginning. And the police is now, when they are interrogating a potential victim, they are assuming that what she is saying is actually the truth. They used to assume something else. They used to be like, oh, this case is never going to court. When is this over? So I think there has been very big changes, necessary changes. So that's not a setback, just to be sure that you know that. So the setback is only that now we have a debate again if it's okay. So I think what is really making the big changes in Denmark is all around the investigation. I'm looking at some colleagues from Denmark who is working at a hospital. So, I mean, everything is a lot better around the legislation.
Yes, so I will. I definitely agree with that. The implementation of the law is crucial, and that not just the way that courts evaluate evidence and prosecutors evaluate evidence, but also how evidence is collected is one very important thing that we, in our investigation of the former Finnish law, saw that there were some serious shortcomings that might also still be true. And then it's also a question about resources and the prioritization of different crimes. So there are many questions involved in this. In Finland, we can see it hasn't been really 2 years yet, so it's a very short time. We can see that there is a slight increase in how many cases are reported of rape to the police, which indicates that people are maybe a little bit more inclined to report sexual violence to the police. We also see an increase in the number of hearings, which needs to be further investigated, but it suggests that more cases are also taken up by courts, because that was also a big problem in the previous law, could still be a problem that has to be investigated, but that many cases of rape that were reported were closed before they ever reached the court. And I think that's not a problem only in Finland, but in many other countries.
One more.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you for lovely debate and interesting inputs. I have a question towards Dr. Weiser. If we know that in Denmark, after they adopted new law, there was significant increase of reported rape cases, and also about like 50% and 40% increase in convicted perpetrators. We also know that in Sweden, there is also yes mean yes, there is 75% of increase of convicted perpetrators. And we also know that in Germany, there is, like, as you mentioned, no significant change in reports or conviction. Isn't the German model failing the survivors?
Well, well. What can I say to defend the German model? Well, I'm certainly not here to advocate for no means no or yes means yes. But what I can tell you about the German law is that the legislator has also introduced a new provision on sexual harassment. And that is that are assaults that are very brief and not as severe as a sexual assault. And the numbers under this provision are very high. So at least I can say that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think they deserve an applause. Thank you very much. And we will continue with a discussion between Kersti Kaljulaid and a sexual violence crisis center Dr. Marit Kõre. It will be in Estonian though, please.
Tervist, doktor Kõre.
Tere.
Kas ma tohin küsida, kes on need ohvrid, kellega teie oma töös iga päev kokku puutute?
Meie tegeleme seksuaalvägivalla kriisiabikeskuses seksuaalvägivalla üle elanud inimestega, kes enamasti on naised ja keskmises vanuses 20 alguses, aga vanusegrupp on meil väga lai, meil on olnud 1-aastaseid ja vanuses 70+ inimesi.
Kes nad on inimesena?
Täiesti tavalised inimesed.
Täiesti tavalised meie Eestimaa inimesed. Mis te arvate, kas see, kui meil oleks nõusolekuseadus, jah, mudelipõhine, teeks teie jaoks selle ohvri aitamise, kui ma nüüd vaatan sellest meditsiinilisest poolest natuke kaugemale, kergemaks kuidagi?
Absoluutselt, sellepärast, et praegu tekib meil kolleegidega omavahel väga sageli on selline, tekib frustratsioon, kui me näeme, et inimene on üle elanud vägistamise, mis ilmselgelt on vägistamine, aga seda lihtsalt ei ole võimalik tõestada. Et meie omalt poolt justkui teeme kõik, aga sellest ei juhtu mitte midagi, et inimene peab oma traumadega elama ja võib-olla käima aastaid teraapias, aga toimepanijaga ei juhtu mitte midagi.
Ehk et teie näete, et on olemas vigastused, et inimene on sügavalt traumeeritud šokis. Mis siis puudu on?
No, tegelikult enamasti vigastusi ei ole. Et see ongi see häda, et see vägistamine on hästi... Selles mõttes ma saan aru politseile väga keeruline, et tegelikult seksuaalvägivalla puhul ei ole enamasti üldse vigastusi. See genitalide vigastusi on 20, maksimaalselt 30% juhtudest. Et enamasti ei ole ja see ei tähenda, et ei ole olnud seksuaalvägivalla.
Loomulikult.
Just, et vigastusi ei tekigi, sest et fertiilses eas naise, kellel munasarjad töötavad, tema suguelundid ja limaskestad on hästi pehmed, elastsed, venivad, et seal ei tekigi vigastusi. Ja enamasti nad ei hakka ka vastu, mis on ka loomulik füsioloogiline reaktsioon, et nad ei hakka vastu. Ja siis seal ei saagi vigastusi oodata. Ja Eesti seadusandlus praegu on selline, et vägistamine on seaduse mõistes vägistamine, juhul kui kaasnevad füüsilised vigastused. Genitalide vigastused isegi ei mängi rolli, põhiline on just kehavigastuste olemasolu või tõestatud abitu seisund. Aga see teeb keeruliseks tõestatud abitu seisund, et kuidas seda tõestada, seksuaalvägivald on tavaliselt 2 inimese vahel, et seal on väga harva tunnistajaid.
Seal on ka veel see võimusuhte nüanss, eks ole.
Ja see tegelikult absoluutselt ei arvesta see seadus ka normaalseid füsioloogilisi reaktsioone, mis selle ründajal siis ohvriga toimuvad. Et meil on praegu, võib isegi olla niimoodi, et naine väljendab ei, ta ütleb ei, ta ei soovi. Ta võib-olla karjub, ta nutab või ta lihtsalt ütleb rahulikult ei. Mul just eile käis üks patsient, kellel oli tema enda partner, siis toime pannud vägivaldse seksuaalakti ja naine oli korduvalt väljendanud, et ta seda ei soovi, aga teda ei kuulatud. Ja siis ta lihtsalt ühel hetkel, lihtsalt enam ei jaksa, et sa nagu loobud sellest vastupanust. Aga see on väga hästi, kui ta ütleb ei, mitte et see praegu seaduse mõistes loeks, aga suurematel osadel juhtudel inimene isegi kas ei oska, ei julge või ei suuda väljendada oma eid. Mitte, et ta seda tahtlikult ei tahaks teha, vaid lihtsalt need ongi need normaalsed füsioloogilised traumareaktsioonid, mis tekivad. Et kui inimest rünnatakse, siis ohvri jaoks tuleb see alati ootamatult. Toimepanija võib-olla plaanib seda pikemalt ette. Ta näeb, et võib-olla seal on keegi naine, kes on natukene purjus või kuskil mingil peol keegi läheb kuskil teise tuppa magama, ta juba mõtleb selle peale, et äkki ta saab seda kuidagi moodi teha, ta kavandab seda ette. Aga selle ohvri jaoks tuleb see ootamatult. Ja tema aju reageerib nii, et ta võtab seda rünnakut sageli eluohtlikuna, sest see tuleb lihtsalt nii järsku. Ja siin ongi see, et kuna see rünnak toimub järsku, siis enne seda, kui inimene üldse ratsionaalselt selle peale mõtlema juba hakata, hakkavad tööle tema ürgsed ajuosad, ehk tema hirmukeskus juba enne reageerib, kui inimese aju korjab sellele reageerida, mis on meile tahtele allu. Et reaktsioone, mulle tundub kahjuks ka meie seadusandluses paljud inimesed ei tea, et meie kohtunikul ka võib-olla ei ole selles osas harjutada võib-olla seda ka palju nõuda, et neil ongi väga erinevad juhtumid, millega nad tegelevad.
Aga see seadus, kui ta meil oleks olemas, siis peaksid hakkama prokurörid ja kohtunikud mõtlema selle teema peale teistpidi, et kui inimene ei ole öelnud jah, ja jah, sa ei ütle ka, kui sa oled selles tardumuse seisundis, siis on võimalik tõestada, et tegemist oli vägistamisega, isegi kui tegemist on nagu selles õnnetusnäites peresisese vägistamise juhtumiga.
Sest antud juhul on ka tahtevastane vahekord Eestis minu meelest täiesti seaduslik, seepärast, et praegu ei loe ka see ei ütlemine midagi, rääkimata sellest, et arvestatakse selle tardumisega.
Jah, meile tundub, et see on juriidiline nüanss, aga tegelikult tuleb välja, et tegemist on puhtalt füsioloogilise teemaga ja sellepärast on väga oluline, et me kuulaksime arste ka. Aitäh!
Aitäh!
Taani jah-mudelist me eelnevas arutelus juba mõnevõrra kuulsime ja Taani kogemusega ka jätkame. Taanlased on nimelt juba jõudnud seda mudelit nii kaua praktiseerida, et nad suudavad teha järeldusi sellest kogemusest ja läbi on viidud uuring, mis on üsna värske, mis siis võrdleb siis 3 aastat enne ja pärast nõusolekuseadust Taanis olukorda, et kuidas oli enne ja kuidas on pärast. Ja meie juurde on tulnud kliiniline psühholoog Liine Eibi ning antropoloog Aviaja Moose Vingender. Nad mõlemad töötavad Kopenhaageni Rikshospitality seksuaalvägivalla keskuses. Kuulame nende esitlust. Please, Liine ja Aviaja. Stage is yours.
Yes. Hello, and thank you so much for having us here, for the invitation. We are really honored to be here. My name is Aviaja, and this is my colleague Line, and we were just introduced. So, just a moment. Yes. We will talk a bit about the experience of Denmark with this consent-based rape law that we had in 2021, and you already heard a bit from Helle. So I will first give a brief introduction to Denmark and to the Centers for Victims of Sexual Assault. So you can see the population in Denmark is nearly 6 million people, and it's estimated that 15,000 people are raped each year. And last year we had 1,840 reported rapes to the police. So as you can see, there is a large number of unreported cases and hence dark figures in this area. We have 9 centers for victims of sexual assault. They are located in hospitals across the country, and we offer free 24-hour services, and there's no requirement for the police to be involved. You can get help anyways. If the rape is reported to the police, the forensic examination will take place at our center. If the victim is in doubt whether to report to the police or not, we will still offer an examination, and we will keep the evidence for 1 year if the victim wants to report later. Yeah. So we come from the center at Copenhagen University Hospital. It is the largest of the 9 centers in Denmark. It opened in 2000, and we receive victims from the age of 16 years. We accept everyone. No referral is required, and we don't have a time limit. It means that we will receive victims right after a sexual assault, but also years after, many years after. However, if it's childhood sexual abuse, we will refer to another center. But otherwise, there's no time limit. And we receive between 600 and 700 victims each year. So, and we offer examination, treatment, and counseling within the medical, psychological, social, and sexuological areas. And we do data recording of all our cases. So that was a very brief introduction to Denmark and the centers. I will now move on to the topic of before and after the consent-based rape law. As you can see here, these are the reported rapes in Denmark. As you can see, we had the consent-based rape law. It came into effect in 2021. And there was a rise in the numbers of reported rapes. And before, as we just heard, before the consent-based rape law, there was a focus on violence and threats, and now it's on consent. There was a rise in numbers in 2021, and then a slight decrease in 2022 and 2023. We have had an increase in convictions, but only small numbers also. Okay. Okay, yeah. In our center, we are currently working on a project titled Rape in Eastern Denmark Before and After the Consent-Based Rape Law. And I will now introduce you to this project. The background is, of course, the consent-based rape law that came into effect in 2021. And we're looking at data from our center from 3 years before, so from 2018, and until 3 years after 2023 last year. For many years in our center, the rate of police-reported rapes has been the same. And last year, the Ministry of Justice assessed that the consent-based rape law is helping to change the public's understanding of rape. And what we are curious about is that also reflected in the numbers? And that's what we want to investigate with this project. We therefore look at data from those who reported the rape to the police and those who did not report the rape to the police. And we are asking what characterizes these groups, and is there a difference between before and after the law? Yeah. So the purpose of the project is to gain systematic knowledge. It can help to provide an understanding that rape can take many forms, and hopefully this will help to reduce stigmatization of victims. A study from 2021 in Denmark concluded that certain groups of young people still hold stereotypical views on rape. So we need further knowledge to support targeted prevention strategies. And our hope is that this study will contribute to that. Furthermore, the focus on before and after the consent-based rape law will hopefully demonstrate how legal practice can influence societal attitudes over time. Yeah, this is just an overview of the data we are collecting. We have not yet recorded all data, but our hypothesis is that in some of these parameters, we will be able to see a change after the consent-based rape law. Yeah, and now I will turn to some preliminary results. It's very important to note that we have not yet recorded all data, so results are subject to some uncertainty. But what you see here is an overview of rape cases in our center from 2018 to 2023. And the orange line in the middle symbolizes the implementation of the consent-based rape law. As you can see, we had a rise in cases when the law was implemented in 2021, 2022, and then a small decrease in 2023. What we have to remember is that 2020 was an unusual year since we had the COVID pandemic, so it closed down most things. So that could explain the rise also in numbers here. But as we just saw in the other graph before, there was also in the national numbers a rise in cases from after the implementation of the new law, and then a small decrease, and that's the same we can see in our center. Yeah, so this is a figure of reported and unreported cases in our center. The blue reported to the police. The blue line is police reported cases, and the orange or yellow line is unreported cases. So the proportion of how many cases are reported to the police. And the gray line down there is the cases that were victims who attempted to report to the police but were rejected. But as you can see, the numbers are fortunately low. That the graph here shows much the same picture over the years might be related to a combination of several factors. Since 2016, there has been a political focus on how the police handle these cases. It was highlighted by an initiative by the then Minister of Justice called Respect for Victims of Rape. And we have also had 2 waves of Me Too. So it's difficult to determine what is the effect of what in our numbers, especially also with COVID and everything. But some trends in our data that should be examined further, but some preliminary results indicate that there may have been changes following the consent-based rape law. Yeah, it appears that victims are slightly older, and it applies to both police-reported and unreported cases. Then it appears that more victims who have not been subjected to violence during the rape, that they are reporting to the police now after the new rape law. We need more data to make sure that we can make any conclusions from this, but it's interesting as it might suggest that more victims have the courage to report to the police, even though they were not subjected to violence, physical violence during the rape. Furthermore, maybe more victims will define their experience as rape. Last year we saw a bigger proportion of victims who did not verbally or physically resist the rape. And this is in both reported and unreported cases. We saw a larger proportion of victims who did not physically or verbally resist the rapist. And we could, maybe a cautious interpretation is that this new law and all the debate about consent and so in society has helped more victims to acknowledge that they have been raped, even though it didn't have anything to do with how they responded to it, but it was still a rape. So, again, it's very important to know that these are only preliminary results and that we must be cautious with drawing conclusions yet. And we must also keep in mind that our law was only implemented 3 years ago. So we need more years to make any conclusions. Social change takes time, but these results that we have now are encouraging, I think, and we are very optimistic about how it looks. And you have your own. Sorry.
Yeah. So my name is Lina. I'm a clinical psychologist. Oh, yeah. Oops. And I would like to finish our presentation by talking a little bit about healing from sexual assault and rape, and how normal reactions, rape myths, culture and legislation all play a part in recovery and motivation. Yeah. Ja, det tror jeg da heller. Den fløjten der, okay. Ja. a motivation for seeking help and contacting authorities. That can be sexual assault centers or the police. And I will focus on sexual aspects of consent law and its effect on recovery. So following a sexual assault, when we have experienced the threat, subsequently we will look for threats in our surroundings in order to avoid them. And in order to protect ourselves. That often happens through avoidance of anything that's connected to the assault. Also, people often experience very negative thoughts about themselves, and they're often uncertain if what they have experienced is serious enough, for instance, for help seeking. And this can affect their ability to work and study, for instance, if their cognitive levels are affected, like memory and concentration, which also often happens if you're stressed. And it can also affect relationships, and victims often feel vulnerable, overwhelmed, unsure, and often very alone. So feeling scared about what other people might think about you if they hear about the sexual assault and the need to protect yourself becomes even worse when adding the discourse about rape in society, for instance, the rape myth. So a typical rape myth looks something like this: a violent assault made by a stranger. Oh. It's coming tilbage. Ah, there we are. Sorry. All right. So, excellent. A violent assault made by a stranger, where the victim tries to fight back, and following the rape, contacts authorities immediately. During interviewing or trials, appropriate reactions that come from the victim are seen as relevant affect, sadness, crying. In other words, they behave like a victim, passive and scared. So, however, rape myths and the idea of a violent stranger is a very simplistic description of sexual assault and a scenario that rarely happens in reality. In our center, we see that most victims know their assailant, 75%. And when you know your assailant, the rape will often be characterized by a degree of manipulation, pressure, or coercion, like we've heard before. And this makes the situation more complicated and more difficult to define as sexual assault. So this idea of the perfect victim who reacts in a specific way affects perception, and there are various consequences. It can create doubt in the victim, whether they will be believed and if what they've experienced really was rape. I doubt myself. I'm afraid of if others won't believe me if I tell them what happened to me. So, and in a cultural sense, these rape myths are seen in viewpoints such as women who dress in short skirts and show cleavage are asking for it. If they drink too much, it's their own fault. I feel sorry for the perpetrator. His life shouldn't be ruined just because he made a little mistake. Boys will be boys. In other words, they can't help themselves. Yeah, so motivation for reaching out to family and friends or the authorities is also influenced by culturally determined myths of rape. And as we have seen, doubt and self-preservation is very high in victims, and the feeling that you have to prove that it was rape can keep people from going to the police. So there can be consequences not only psychological, but also in terms of access to using your human rights, from feelings of shame and fear of not being believed. Yeah. And also, there might be a possible preventive effect in the perpetrator if you adopt the yes means yes law. Even in cases where it's word against word, the perpetrator can potentially gain an increased awareness of the boundaries he or she has violated. We can hope. Yeah, so I'll skip this. I think you know this. Oh, where were we? Oh, what's going on? Right. Okay. So. Ej, nu er den altså helt mærkelig. Er vi ejer? There we are, okay. Okay, excellent, good stuff. Yeah, so based on clinical observations in our center, in some patients we can see that the new law has helped them come to terms with their experience and, for instance, feelings of guilt, because they feel that there is a clearer focus on whether their consent was clear and not so much on violence. And so this shift in who's responsible, as we've heard as well, the victim or the perpetrator. Also, we've heard that when police cases are dropped, we hear from some patients that it can be easier to accept because there is less doubt about the victim's own role. So it's not dropped because they don't believe me. Right. So when we look at reasons why people do not contact our center immediately, we found that the main reasons are that they wanted to forget what happened, and that was 71% who answered this, and they wanted to deal with it themselves. That's 81%. Possibly, we think, due to shame, again, uncertainty, whether they'll be believed or not. So for people who did not contact the center immediately, we see that the new consent law and the new way of thinking has helped them in their process of realization. They begin to understand that it was a sexual assault and they feel validated. People also comment on the difference between the Me Too movement and the consent law. In the Me Too movement, there is a focus on awareness. On awareness and cultural discourse, but it's also very subjective and an expression of people's private opinions. So when the state, on the other hand, takes responsibility for defining the experience, it carries more weight and shows a more objective, neutral truth about what rape really is. And so, in that way, legislation shapes language and thought and becomes bearer of culture and discourse. Yeah, so I'll just finish by talking a little bit about social support. So we can see that the consent law influences victims themselves, but we also see in the center that it affects people around them. So friends and family and the way that they react to sexual assault. Research emphasizes the importance of victim support system as an essential element in healing. People who have a supportive family and friends show lower levels of post-traumatic stress and they recover quicker. So I will illustrate this with a short case from our center. So a young woman is raped by her former boyfriend and her father has a difficult time understanding what happened. To begin with, he focuses on typical rape myths and asks questions such as, did he hit you? No. Did he threaten you? No. Then how can it be rape? So instead, when focusing on the question, did you consent, the essence of what had happened became clearer and easier to understand for the dad. Yeah. So in summary, all these aspects put together, normal reactions and rape myths, all affect recovery and the possibility of re-establishing dignity. The consent-based rape law helps to define culture and language and how we interact and think about each other. And as we see in our center, the new rape-based consent law can make it easier for victims to feel less alone and will hopefully improve help seeking in years to come. Thank you. Now there are questions.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting, and I'm looking towards the audience. Does anyone have a question, or do you want to specify anything that was already said? Yeah, there is one hand, please. Bring him the mic.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. My name is Christian, I'm the Equality Commissioner here in Estonia. And I have a question. I was maybe a year ago in Vilnius at a conference on masculinities, and there was a Danish person giving a presentation there, and he was claiming that after the consent law was adopted in Denmark, there was also a spike on male victims coming forward to the centers. Does that claim sort of support also your evidence, or what are the sort of thoughts around that this law is actually good also for men?
I think definitely. Actually, I think the rates of how many men are contacting our center is the same. It's about 4%. But we think that it might be higher this year, but we haven't done the numbers yet. But actually, I did a study which is about men who contact our center. And I interviewed 11 male persons who came to our center to seek help, and to ask them about their experience with what they had been exposed to, and their journey from being exposed to sexual violence and then contacting a center like ours. And with there, I think definitely, because all of them, they were really different male persons. And but what was really important to all of them was that it was so difficult for them to acknowledge that they had been exposed to a sexual assault. And research also points to that it's more difficult often for men to acknowledge sexual assault because they are supposed to fight it off. So because we have all these thoughts about masculinity. And I think that this new law makes it easier for male persons also to acknowledge if they have been exposed to sexual violence. I can't support this with numbers yet. I hope I can soon. But definitely I think it helps everybody to acknowledge if they have been exposed to sexual violence, sexual assault. And that will be men too. Yeah.
Thank you. I will ask one question in addition to that, to the same topic. Hella here before talked quite a lot about the change of mindset and the culture, that the law itself doesn't change it. And now when we talked about male victims, then do you see anything that we should also do in the society, in the discussion, so that it would support them to be also more brave to step forward if such situation has happened?
Definitely to have a conversation about it, that male victims also exist, that it's possible for a man to be raped or to be sexually assaulted. I mean, just that conversation, that you can reach out to people so they will be aware, because what these male victims told me was that it was so difficult for them to, because they didn't have anything to reflect their experience with, like mirroring in the experience of others. It would always be the women's stories, or women's perspectives, but they really needed something they could mirror their own experience in another male person's victimization. So I think just to say it out loud that male persons are also victimized sexually is the first move forward.
And can be victimized by a woman.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's harsh, but that's how it is. Anyone else has a question? Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. There was a graph on your presentation, thank you very much for this, where you explained the cases. The number of cases went up after the consent law, and then later, a year later, it seemed to decline. What are your thoughts on this? Why is it declining, or is it like just a temporary thing, or do you think it will go decline even more or rise again? What are your thoughts? Thank you.
Thank you. Very good question. And very difficult to answer. I think it's different aspects that we have to look at. Like I said, that we had a COVID pandemic, it closed down everything in 2020, and then we had the new rape law, the consent-based rape law in 2021. So I think with or without it, we would have seen a rise or in numbers anyways, but maybe there was a bigger rise than what it would have been. And with the small decrease now, it could optimistic. It could be because we don't have that many rapes. I'm not sure if that is the correct interpretation. But definitely, I think there's a conversation about what is consent. How do we have sex? Do we have to consent to this? What is rape? What is the difference between it? I think we have like a larger conversation in society now, or in Denmark now, and I think it helps to, I don't know, maybe clarify what is a rape. And I don't know if that's why we see a decline, but we could hope that's why. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
No, not really. But it was the whole country. It wasn't just our center. So it was, so it was around the whole country. I think it's just too soon to really say what that drop means. It's not very much. So I think in 10 years we'll know what it means. But right now, we can just keep talking, I think.
Thank you. Any more questions? Or then I'll ask myself. I have many. No. All right. It will be a last as well. So you said that you've only had just 3 years with the YES model. Well, I think 3 years is better than no years. And as we are just starting this discussion here in Estonia, then what would you say, what are the big no's and big yeses that we should definitely don't do and do? What we need to avoid when we now start the discussion and try to change the law and the culture? From your experience, where do you see, where are the biggest pain points that we should really have focused on?
I think, as Helle said before, with education, I think education really is the way forward.
Yes, I agree. Training police is very important, and from a psychological aspect, rape is not just the police case or collecting trace. It's the whole recovery is because it can be. We see young people having to quit school, people going on sick leave for months because they're so affected by what happened. So the whole recovery, the whole support is just very important, which has nothing to do with the consent law, but maybe it does. I think maybe it does.
Education. And educating police. I'm very happy that we have the chief of police here today listening to us.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies.
You're welcome.
It's an important job that you're doing, so please continue. Thank you, everyone, for listening so far. We are going to have a 20 minutes coffee break now, and then we'll continue. Paus 20 minutit. Kohvi ja suupisted on tagapool. Enne kui ma juhatan sisse meie järgmise kõneleja, tahtsin veel täiendusena selgitada ka, et need videod, mis te siin vahepaladena olete näinud ja mida me ka veel näeme, kus me siis õpime läbi ekspertide tundma ohvri teekonda, siis need on tehtud seksuaalvägivalla kriisiabikeskustes, milles siis Tallinnas on see keskus Pelgulinna sünnitusmajas, aga üle Eesti on neid punkte 4. Need on Tallinnas, Tartus, Pärnus ja Kohtla-Järvel. Nii et need keskused ei toimi päris nüüd igas meditsiiniasutuses või sünnitusmajas, vaid neid on täpselt 4 punkti Eestis ja seal on siis spetsiaalse koolituse ja väljaõppe saanud meditsiinitöötajad ja samamoodi ka siis vajalikud vahendid, mida kõige esimeses videos ka nägite. No nii, nüüd mulle tundub, et kõik on enam-vähem oma ampsu kätte saanud ja maha istunud. Ja ma võin meie järgmise esineja välja kuulutada. Ja järgmine kõneleja tuleb Stockholmist. Anna Möller on Karolinska instituudi naistekliiniku gynekoloog ja tema on kirjutanud, mitte ainult kirjutanud, vaid ka kaitsnud doktoritöö seksuaalvägivalla mõjus tervisele ning avaldanud teadusartikleid tardumisest ehk siis toonilisest liikumatusest, mida me kuulsime ka viimases videos. Ning praegult tegeleb ta eelkõige meessoost ohvritega ja uurib just nimelt neid. Ja ta on spetsialistina tihtipeale siis ka Rootsis kohtusaalis, sest et kuna ta on ekspert, siis tihtipeale tal tulebki neid selgitusi jagada, mida ta siis oma töös on avastanud. Eelkõige selgitades siis, mida tähendab ohvri traumaseisund. Anna, I made your intro in Estonian, but there was nothing you don't know. So please, stage is yours and share your experience to the audience. Thank you.
Yes, I didn't get much apart from the expert. I didn't have my hearing aid on. So, my name is, as you said, Anna Möller. I'm a gynecologist, and so I'm from the healthcare side of this forum today, as well as at least the Danish for women. I have sort of focused my whole clinical career and my research career about consequences of rape and how the victims are reacting and how they are feeling afterwards. So I will talk today about my research, and I know that you've all heard about the freeze reaction. Now we're going to talk about it in a more scientific way and the research that we have done. I am a researcher at Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, and majority of my research is on the emergency clinic for rape victims and the patients there. So, responses to threat, such as, for example, a perpetrator that is raping you. There is one part in the brain that's called amygdala. It's a part of the basal ganglia. We actually have two amygdala, one in the right hemisphere and one in the left hemisphere. And the only reason that we have amygdala there is to be aware of threats around us. And amygdala is focusing, is there any threat around here? This is why we are nervous before we go up to having a speech. Maybe you are not, maybe you don't like me. And then I see the friendly faces, and my frontal cortex tell me that these are not bad people, they are nice. But amygdala thinks everything is terrible. And if we see that there's something around us and we see that it's a threat, we react like this, like the animal here. So if there was a loud noise in here, we will all react with this. Here we have the sympathetic nervous system. Everything is sort of alert. We look around, we listen. Some of us, if there was an actual threat, saying it wasn't just a construction worker that made the loud noise, it was actually someone threatening us. Some of us will act with active coping, run away, or actually stay fighting. And we don't really know who that is. Our patients, they really rarely, very rarely act with active coping. They react with passive coping. And this is how we would react here in here as well. Some of us will stay here and just shut off. And here's the parasympathetic nervous system that are activated. Passive coping, frozen fright, playing dead, tonic immobility. It's all the same thing, but different names. And here's the parasympathetic activation. Low pulse and blood pressure. Dissociation, meaning that you see yourself outside your body. It's an unrealistic feeling. Is this really happening? paralyzed, you can't move, and you can't speak. So this is how majority of our victims react. In animal life, this is commonly known as tonic immobility, and you can see animals in nature, small squirrels, reptiles, when they are threatened, they react with this. And they really look dead. And if you let them be there for a while, they will run away. And this is really, really commonly studied in animal life and among researchers. However, we are animals as well, aren't we? So why shouldn't we react like this? So when we realized that a majority of our victims, they said that when they told their stories about what has happened, they said, and then I froze. I froze. Not in a way that they were freezing, but they froze, they became paralyzed. So I searched the literature, and there were not many studies, but there were a few, and the majority of them were focusing on sexual assault victims. And however, there were few, and they were cross-sectional, and they were retrospective, meaning that they have asked a large number of participants or people if they had been exposed to sexual assault, and then asked them, how did you react? So that could have been like 10, 15 years afterwards. And there's something called memory bias. How well do you remember something that happened 10, 15 years ago? Even though as much as up to 50% reported this tonic immobility reaction. So we wanted to do a better study at Karolinska Institute, and there's actually a scale called tonic immobility scale. It's a validated scale. You can translate it into your own country, language if you want to. I think that's being done now in Estonia. It's 10 questions, quite easy. You're supposed to rate on the degree from 0 to 6, on which you, for example, were unable to move, even though you weren't restrained. You were unable to call out or scream during the event. So it's sort of typical signs of paralysis or tonic immobility. So we administered this scale at the doctor's appointment 10 to 14 days after the acute visit. Everyone is offered to come back for a doctor's appointment after 2 weeks. And then we gave them this scale, the tonic immobility scale. So we included almost 300 patients in this study. And then we followed them for 6 months and saw them again at 6 months. And then we saw whether they had developed post-traumatic stress disorder or not, and depression. So we did a clinical interview, and they were to answer questionnaires. There's always a drop-off when you do studies on sexual assault victims. They are have a lot of avoidance, and they don't come back. But this is quite a high number of patients that actually came back, 189. But then you look at the scale, and if you have a cutoff score of over 21, you actually have a significant tonic immobility reaction, and an extreme one if you have over 28. So what did the results show? This is an article that we published in 2017 in Acta Obstetrica Gynecological Scandinavia, which is the largest news journal for obstetrics and gynecologists in the Scandinavian countries. It has a really high impact factor. And it's called Tonic Immobility During Sexual Assault, a common reaction predicting post-traumatic stress disorder and severe depression. And maybe you've heard of the numbers. 7 out of 10 people react with this tonic immobility during the assault when they are asked 2 weeks after the assault. And we also saw that, the doctor in the film here told us that if you have traumas before, you have a higher risk of reacting with tonic immobility. That's what we also saw. And that if you do react with tonic immobility, you have a higher risk of developing post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. After the study, we implemented this scale in our clinical practice. I can't show you any published data, but it looks exactly the same when you ask men. They react exactly the same way. They also react with tonic immobility. Unfortunately, I can't publish it because I don't have written consent from all the male patients. We started taking care of male patients in Stockholm in the same clinic in 2015. So now we have quite a lot of men that we can actually also ask how they were reacting. So what's the clinical implication of this? We talked about guilt and shame. We always talk about guilt and shame, guilt and shame. But this is a way of reducing the guilt and shame, saying that if 7 out of 10 people in studies react with tonic immobility, you shouldn't blame yourself for not having made resistance. And all the significant others that put blame on the victim for not having made resistance, this is also a proof that they are wrong. So we use a lot of this in our psychoeducation to our victims. We actually talk about it all from the beginning at the acute visit. We always ask for resistance because we are supposed to look for injuries. But in the next sentence, we say that we also know that majority don't make resistance. So that's not really why we're asking. So we don't blame them further. So it's difficult. It's really important to use it in healthcare. But of course, it has implication to the law as well. And as I said, this article was published in 2017. In 2018, we got the Swedish consent law. That we talked about is a yes law. Yes or active participation in the sexual act is the only way that it can be seen as voluntariness. If we have a no model saying that the victim has to say no, if 7 out of 10 react with paralyzed or tonic immobility, that's not really comparable, is it? You can't really use that, in my opinion. But I'm not in law, I'm healthcare. Okay. This article was actually one of the most sort of cited one in 2019, which sort of is quite powerful. So now we've had the consent law for 6 years. There's no representative from the Swedish law system here, and I wonder why. I'm not from the law system, but we had it for 6 years, and what has happened? I will interpret it a bit what happened in the law, on the law side, but I will talk about healthcare. But if you look at police-reported rapes, we know that they increased, but they had already started increasing before the law. In the wake of the Me Too movement that was actually in Sweden already in 2017, it had already started. So the increase of number of police reported, this sort of followed the same trend as before. And then you see also here it sort of decreased after a while. We have the pandemic. Actually, people in self-rating questioning, these population-based surveys that are being widely used in Sweden, they also reported less experience of sexual assault after 2022. So I don't really know what happened, if it's the pandemic or not. But also a higher number of prosecuted rapes after 2018 and convicted rape felonies. Then in healthcare, what happened in healthcare? Well, actually nothing. So in Stockholm, we have this emergency clinic for rape victims, and we have a centralized care in Stockholm. So all patients that seek medical help acute after rape, they come to our center. And we have about 900 acute patients each year. We did not see an increase of patients coming to us after the new legislation. It seemed like they were already coming to us. And the blue numbers here are the men. We open for men, or these are actually the ones that have a male personal number. Maybe they don't identify themselves as men, I don't know. And we opened 2015 for men, and there has not been an increase after the legislation either. We have about 40, 50 men each year. So nothing has really happened. It seemed like these patients were already coming to us. And that's why we heard all these stories before as well. And then I froze. So the impact of the consent law on the care of sexual survivors, sexual assault survivors, well, we were already thinking that a sexual assault without violence or threat of violence was an assault already before in the way we were handling our patients. I am a lecturer at Karolinska Institute, and I usually ask my students before the lecture, in the beginning of the lecture, what's a sexual assault? What's a rape? And even before the legislation, almost all students said, that's when someone has sex with you that you don't want to. And that has been the opinion in society for a long time, but the law has been a bit late, I think. So now when we're talking to our patients, this is one of our counselors at our clinic. we can say that now the law is always there, also there, saying the same thing. You're assaulted and you were exposed to something that you didn't want, and now the law says the same thing. It's a rape. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Please stay, because I'm sure there will be questions for you.
Maybe.
I'm seeing many eager hands. Yes, one eager hand, please.
Hello. Thank you for your excellent presentation. My question is actually not about the freeze reaction, but the fawn reaction. It's proposed a fourth reaction in this kind of situations. The reaction that when the victim tries to please the perpetrator, it seems like an active reaction. What is your opinion? Do you think it is?
That's actually a completely different reaction from the tonic immobility. That when you sort of realize that if I make resistance, if I say something, the violence will become even worse. That's sort of an active choice that you make. And that has not really it's not really the same as the tonic immobility, which is a biological mechanism that you can't really sort of, you don't decide. Okay?
So it's not actually in these three reactions, it's like a different, cognitive process.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And the thing is, when the patients that say that they reacted with this tonic immobility, it could be anyone. It could be someone who's trained police officer and got raped and react exactly the same way, even though they're sort of trained to defend themselves in other situations.
Yeah. Please, another question?
Thank you very much also for the presentation. It was very interesting. My question, as I understood from the intro, is that you or your colleagues have been summoned to court also to give, to answer the questions about tonic immobility. So when we have discussed it here in Estonia, then one of the biggest questions has been that are the experts willing to go to court, and can they really say that this person had tonic immobility? Or they can just give a general explanation what tonic immobility is. So what is your practical, so how has it been in Sweden? So how do you feel? Which questions and how specific questions can you answer about a specific case regarding tonic immobility? Thank you very much.
So I was not in the room when the rape happened, so I can never prove that this was the way she reacted. It's her story. But I'm quite often in court, especially a few years ago when the new law came. And I'm just sort of giving my statement of what tonic immobility is and my sort of clinical experience from all the stories I've heard. And then, of course, if we believe that victims lie, then she could make up a story that she froze because she've heard about it, but that's not the way I'm thinking about things. But I wasn't in the room. And to prove that she reacted with this, well, there's no really objective way to do that if there's no one else in the room. This questionnaire is sort of a bit more valid than just a story.
Thank you. One more question?
I'm Kersti Kaljulaid, former president of Estonia, and my question relates to, do you have any knowledge or has it been analyzed, for example, how many police officers, prosecutors, judges in your country are aware of the biological nature of the tonic immobility? And how has that changed during now the law has been actually approved and in practice?
You have been talking about that earlier today, that you can not just have a law, you also have to sort of do educational efforts. So that has been done in Sweden. I know quite a lot of sort of schools for the judges and these organizations in Sweden. They have had this educational sort of tours around. Yeah. And what we have not been talking about today, but that when we have the law is something that's sort of put a normative sign to society that this is not okay, even though it's hard to prosecute someone, but that shouldn't say that we shouldn't have the law. This is like a sign to society that this is not okay. And then we also have to start early. We have to have good sort of education in school, sexual education, the way we don't just talk about how to make babies, we also talk about consent and what's okay and not okay. Teach our boys and our girls, not teach our girls to say no. We should also teach the boys how to know that someone is wanting to have sex. That's so important. And now the middle age for young boys to start looking at porn in Sweden is 12 years old. So if the first encounter of sex is seeing a porn movie, then we have to talk about it in school, early age.
Thank you, Anna. All right, we're out of time, but I'm going to allow the one more question.
Hi.
My name is Kai Part and I'm also a gynecologist here in Estonia. And we also have first men in sexual assault centers. Out of 200 cases, maybe we have 10 men in a year. And our experience has been that the perpetrators are also other men. What is your experience?
Yeah, we've just finished, now we've gathered information from all the men that we had since 2015 to 2022, and 5% of the perpetrators are female, so a vast majority of the perpetrators are also male. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Now we're really out of time.
Yeah,
thank you, Anna. It was very interesting and important presentation, discussion. Jätkame aruteluga ja järgmiseks ma palun endaga koos lavale veel mõned põnevad vestluskaaslased. Esimene neist on Ann Wind ja tema on Taanist sellise organisatsiooni nagu Sex and Some Food ehk pereplaneerimise ühing direktor ja ta on kirjutanud pedagoogika ja didaktika prismas nii soolisusest kui ka seksuaalsusest. Ja ta töötab ka siis lastele ja noortele suunatud seksuaalhariduse algatustega. Nii et kui me just praegult ka siin rääkisime, kuidas siis seda teadlikkust ühiskonnas kasvatada, siis ma usun, et järgmise arutleja kogemus on ka meile kindlasti oluline. Lisaks temale tuleb lavale Johanna Neidlova. Tema on siis Tšehhist ja organisatsiooni Consent asutaja ja juht. Ta on Tšehhi naiste ühenduse täitevkomitee liige ja toimetab ka ajakirja, mis neid teemasid kajastab. Ning tema ühiskondlikku panust on hinnatud üle Euroopa ja temal oli ka oluline panus sellesse, et 2024. aastal Tšehhi nõusolekuseaduse vastu võttis. Kuigi ma olen juba kuulnud, et selle seaduse vastuvõtmine lõppkokkuvõttes väga hästi ei läinudki, aga eks me tema käest kuuleme täpsemalt. Ja lisaks neile tuleb lavale advokaadibüroo Valles vandeadvokaat Silver Reinsaar ja ma loodan, et Silver oma kogemusega kohtuadvokaadina, kes on väga palju pidanud tegelema ka sellega, et kaitsta tuleb ohvreid ja olles spetsialiseerunud kriminaalasjadele suudab siis selle arutelu panna ka natuke rohkem meie Eesti konteksti. Enough of intro. Please can I have Ann Wind, Johanna Neidelova and Silver Reinsaar on stage here with me. And we are going to discuss how to shape society's understanding on consent. And putting a question into is, do we have to ask our partners too? Or, if you've lived together for a long time and maybe you've even married, some people do marry these days, then do you still have to ask permission? Shall we start from that and then dig more into the society?
Yeah, that's a question we are getting quite often. In consent, we are doing prevention in schools and teaching kids about consent. And as they are young people starting to having sex, it's maybe more important to stress to them that it's really good to ask, because for them it can be hard to read the body language. Also, later in relationships, when you really good know your partner, you most probably know how they react. How does it look like when they like something? How does it look like when they don't like something? What we are explaining to people, that if the person behaves weirdly, is like not moving, not interacting, that's the point where you really should ask. If the person is like active, showing that she or he do like it, then you don't have to ask. But it's not so hard to ask, do you like it? Should I continue? What do you want me to do? It usually makes the sex better. That's what we are explaining to people. It's about communication. Asking for consent doesn't mean you need to say, do I have your consent? This is not very sexy, but you can ask the nice way and makes the thing just better.
Thank you for a very, very positive approach to it. I do believe it's important that we address those very difficult issues in a way that it would be more comfortable to have a discussion. So how about you, Johanna? How is the discussion going in your country?
Well, I think in Denmark there's a broad support.
Did I mix you up? Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
You're Anne. You're Anne.
I'm not Johanna. I'm
sorry.
Anna. Yeah. So the discussion in Denmark. What we see in Denmark is generally to the question is that that it is younger people who finds it more difficult to interpret consent. It seems that the older people get, the easier they think it is to interpret consent, but consent is important in all ages. What I think we see in Denmark is, well, there's a broad support for the new consent law in Denmark. Actually, just 1 year ago, the Danish Crime Preventive Council published a report on stereotypical conceptions of rape, but also on attitudes towards consent in Denmark. And that showed that generally the population supports the understanding that that all sexual relations should be based on consent. So I think that's very positive. And I would say from our experience that if you look back like 5 or 10 years ago, consent was not something people would be very aware of or ask many questions about or talk very much about. So I definitely think that we've seen a change in that matter. And then I would also say that in this survey, people also respond, and it's a broad survey. It's based on more than 5,000 respondents, and it's in all ages from 16 to 74. And what we also see is that people say that the change in the law itself has made them more aware of consent and the importance of consent, and also that it has improved their ability to practice consent. So I think that, yes, we've seen a change in that understanding as well.
So you could say that even though the change was in the law positively forced the change of attitudes as well.
I think that's our experience, and that's also what the respondents themselves say. The vast majority of them say that the law in itself has made them reflect and be more aware of the importance of consent. So yes, the law in that way has opened for a cultural change as well.
So Silver, you as an expert in law, what do you say? Is it a matter of law or a matter of culture? What comes first?
It is a matter of culture, of course. I actually think that in majority of people actually live in families or in couples where there is this consent is very ordinary, it's every day. And in most of the cases, it is, people don't think about it, actually. It is something that is always there. But the problem is if there is, sometimes it's not that way. And this is the problem. If I personally find that if the law would change, if we would have this consent in law, then I think that your experience, what you just told, this is something that will happen here too. So we just speak about it more, and then we have, probably we have less situations where there was no consent, actually.
But Silver,
Can I add to it? In Czech Republic, when we decided that we want to change the law, we heard from many experts, mostly male experts, that the law is not there to educate people. If we want to change the situation around rape, we should do education in schools and talk about the issue, but not be changing the law. And later we discovered that 72% of Czech population already considered consent as important part of the sexual interaction. So majority of people know that consent is important, and majority of society as having usually consensual sex. We just need to find a way how to put it into the law and how to just explain to people that if they are having non-consensual sex, it's something which is punishable, because if we are not punishing it, they are not so much pushed not to do it.
Thank you for this. A little bit I want to go back into the law, because you know how the process works. You have to go to the court, and every time when you go there, you need to prove things. So how do you prove a consent that has happened between two people when it's word against the word? I'm only asking this because to understand if we go to a yes model in Estonia, and then how does your life as the one who has to represent someone in court, or probably you can also think on the prosecutor's perspective, how that will change?
Then we have to give evidence whether there was consent or not. Well, me as a lawyer, I can say that it depends on which side I am. It is that way. But if I'm representing victim, then I just have to prove that there was no consent. There was that the victim didn't say anything that would be interpreted as consent, and that is. And if I defend the person who is being accused, then I just have to prove that that my client asked for consent, got positive answer, and the court will decide who the judge or the court believes more. What is the feeling, how they feel, the other evidence that is all around it. It depends on that.
It's also not the only crime where it's very often in the curriculum the word against the word. There are other crimes where you don't have exact evidences, like for example, there are crimes which are committed by threat. How do you prove there is a threat? There was a threat of violence, for example. That's very similar. You need to find out who is more trustworthy, and there are very often experts who are there to find out if the victim is reliable and the judge is there to trust them or not.
Please explain. So you, in Czech Republic, you took the consent law, it became in force in this year, 2024. So what is the exact model you have? Is it the yes model or something else?
Yeah, Czech Republic is not so progressive as we would like to have, as I would like to have, because I'm certainly sure that the model yes means yes is the best, because it actually says that the person is not there always to have a sex. You first need to check if the person wants to have a sex with you. If you say no means no, it means, if you set the law on no means no, it means that the person is there to have a sex if she or he doesn't say no. And that's like from my point of view, significant difference on how we see the bodily autonomy, for example. But Czech Republic, unfortunately, has quite more conservative lawmakers, and at the end, we went to the where the rape is. As rape is considered the sexual intercourse against somebody's will, but we also in the law very well specified the situation when the person was defenseless, which means that they, for example, had the tonic immobility, or there was misuse of power, or there was another reason why the victim or survivor was not able to say no or clearly show that they are not consenting. So this definition should cover all the cases where the victim was not able to fight back or to say no, but it's not clearly based on consent or on an absence of consent.
Okay, so it's a bit different from the Danish model. I'm interested to hear that when you started the discussion in Denmark about the change of the law, as well as in your country, what were the voices against, or were there voices against, like the ones, what these groups in the society said, who said, no, we don't need to change it? Or was it also consensual that everybody said, yes, we need to change the law?
When the law was first changed in Denmark, it was passed in the parliament, and it was an unanimous pass in the parliament. So all the political parties supported the law when it was first passed. Of course, leading up to that change in legislation, there was a public debate around the issue, and I think there was a very important awareness campaign in Denmark focusing on the need for a change. And of course, there was also a political and a public debate, but there was a very successful, I would say, campaign that made it clear that some of the things we've heard today as well, that the legislation we had at that time didn't cover all sexual assaults, and that a change was needed. Yeah.
Silver, how do you see in Estonia, do you already see that there are some arguments against why not to change the law? Or do you see the risks ahead of us that we should today here discuss that how we should prepare in order to have this, let's say, common sense discussion around it to get to the point that we also amend the law?
It actually depends on how modern we are as a society.
So anyone knows?
It's just a question of how modernized we are. Do we live in old times or new times? I think we have to change it anyway.
So we don't know the answer, but we have to do it.
Yeah, of course.
And I would also say that in Denmark, since the passing of the law, there has been some arguing against the law, saying that, for instance, what you see in Denmark is that some people worry about being falsely accused of assault or rape. And I think we see this in the population as well, an increased worry about this. That doesn't necessarily have to do with any change in the practice of the law, but comes from a public debate around the issue. And therefore, I think it's also important that you don't just pass a law, but that you combine that with a lot of information about how to understand that change in the law, what changes come with that reform in the legislation, what does it mean if you have a yes mean yes model, what does it mean to consent? We've seen a need for that in Denmark as well. So what we've seen is that like 2/3 of the population found that they were sufficiently informed about what consent means, but that also leaves 1/3 of the population that didn't feel sufficiently informed about what consent mean or how to understand consent. And I think that's an important thing to focus on as well. There's a need for information about what this change in the law means in all sexual relations and how people should understand this change in the law.
In Czech Republic, there was also like loud opposition against the change. The people were saying that we just don't need it, that it's enough what we have. They were very often making fun of that consent-based law means that you will need to sign a contract before having sex. But as we were trying to lobby for the change and were doing lots of researches, we also discovered that those are myths which doesn't share the majority of population. We found out that only like 2% of Czech believe that consent means you need to sign a contract. I think it's very important when there is the loud opposition to really find out if it's like significant part of the society or if it's just loud minority which has a strong position and strong voice. And we discovered that it's the other situation, that the majority of society wanted the change, which showed the survey, which also helped us to push the legislators to do some change.
So we come back to the talk, explain. The more you do, the better.
Yeah, I think it's the same that we see in Denmark. So the vast majority supports the law, but supporting the law doesn't mean that you find it easy to practice consent. So you can support the law, and that's what we see also among young people, that the vast majority supports the law. Very few are critical of the law, but some young people find it difficult to practice, especially non-verbal consent.
Well, one thing is that we need to educate the youth and the future generations, but we live today. And rapes are happening today, and probably even now while we are here. So who do we have to educate right now, as soon as possible? Silver, do you think that the attorneys in Estonia, and let's take it even wider, the justice system, do we have a unified understanding that yes means yes, or that how do we define consent?
Today?
Yeah, exactly.
I think today maybe not yet, but I think that this kind of gatherings like this today here is something that brings more awareness into society, so that we would know that this is actually an important topic, that we have to do something with it. I think in the future it will be when there will be more and more that kind of events, then the awareness arises.
When you studied in university, you studied law, did any of your professor told you about this, what we're talking here today?
No.
Just checking. Well, okay, that was how many years ago?
I finished the school 9 years ago.
All right, so we also need to educate the education system, people in education. Right.
Yeah, that's right, and actually all the people all around us.
Okay, we all have to go to school. All right. Okay, let's have a last round of thoughts, and then I'll take some questions from the audience. Please put your questions ready, otherwise it will be me again asking. So actually I'm turning to both of you. Now that you have the experience, give us just one recommendation, what definitely to do in order to raise the awareness in the society. Even if it's just a project example that you've done that would give us ideas what to do.
I think it's a complex thing. What brings Czech Republic to the change is, I think that the whole issue was like growing and the society was more informed about it. And we had examples of great journalism work which needs to be supported to cover this kind of cases, this kind of like examples of sexual violence. We had like this kind of Me Too thing when one of the youngest and extremely popular member of parliament, who was called Dominic Ferry, He had 1 million followers on Instagram and was a star. So it was discovered that he's raping girls regularly, and one amazing journalist described this case very, very properly and in detail, and this guy was this year sent to jail for it, and it really helped to change how the society is speaking about the whole issue. I think that also helps really proper education in schools, but not only in primary schools or high schools, but also at universities, where we also need to do consent-based workshops to teach the young people about this issue. But we also need to educate the professionals which are in hospitals, but also, for example, judges. In Czech Republic, there's a whole issue related to the thing that the judges do not have to go to obligatory education after they finish their studies, so they are not up to date or new data and information about domestic or sexual violence. For example, if they don't know that 70% of victims of sexual violence freeze, then it's of course hard for them to make a proper judgment on the case. So I think it's education of all the groups involved into this issue, and supporting the prevention, supporting the good journalism, and talking about this issue.
Thank you, especially for bringing in the journalism as well, as a big influencer in the society. And
I think leading up to the change in the law in Denmark, there was a very important awareness campaign. And I think one of the things that was really strong in that campaign was it was both organizations and strong individual voices. And some of them also shared personal stories of assault. And I think that had an impact, that campaign and that whole awareness of how you can react combined with personal stories had an impact in leading up to the change in law and focusing on the need for a change in the law. And then I would say that we see in Denmark that young people, regardless educational background, there's a big minority of young people who find it difficult to practice consent. But we do see that young people that have had education in schools on consent generally finds it easier to understand what consent means and to practice consent. So education in schools, we know, is an important way to improve general practice on this area. Yeah. And then I would also say one last thing, that in this survey from the Danish Crime Preventive Council, we see that it is especially young men aged 16 to 20 years that find it difficult to determine nonverbal consent. And so when you focus on education, you need to focus especially on this group of young people and make sure that they have the right education to understand and practice consent.
thank you. So final question goes to Silver. It's going to be very short. It's in the headline of this debate. So do we have to ask consent from our partners or husbands or wives as well?
Yes.
Thank you. That was quite obvious. And a beautiful summary of our conversation here. I have time to take a few questions, please.
Yeah, hi, my name is Barbara Haga. I'm from the Ministry of Interior, and I will be part of the discussions. And I just wanted to make a small comment, and I'm not a psychic, I don't see the future, but my guessing is that we don't have a disagreement between ministries and other organizations whether we take the law or not. However, I'm pretty sure that there will be people that disagree on which model to take. So that's something that we will probably have not like a debate, but like a conversation to understand. But I do feel that the ones that maybe lean more to the no model comes back to, which was also discussed on this debate, that it requires changes in the way we work. So I feel like probably it will be the practitioners that that need to kind of get at ease and feel like, yeah, that change is for the best. And the reasoning why I'm for the no model isn't because it's inconvenient for me. So that cannot be the reason why we choose the other one. That's for sure what we're going to look at. But what I just wanted to emphasize that what I hope for, and I'm pretty sure Ministry of Justice and our colleagues from other ministries will do, is that I constantly hear from the very beginning at 1 o'clock until now how important it is to get the society on board. And there were different examples bringing out like campaigns. There were educations talked about in and out. Yet we know that there are parties right now in the government as well who say that talking about sex in school is whoa, that's not a go-go. So I'm hoping that in addition to the debates on yes or no, I feel like we need to have a really good plan, a solid plan, step by step, on how to get the society on board as well. And I was already thinking in my head when to plan the 2 campaigns, when to talk with the Ministry of Education, when to talk with some parties that maybe disagree on those views. So that's, I feel, something that we really need to focus on in Estonia and not take it lightly, but that's all work in progress, and I'm sure we will do it. I'm just sharing my thoughts, first impressions on it. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the input. I think very important perspective, but also I think the political parties you mentioned are in the parliament, not in the government this very moment. But I am very interested to see, are we going to have a unanimous vote in the parliament, as you said? I'm a bit skeptic about that, though.
Also, can I
yes.
actually, when we ask what I would suggest, we were lobbying for 3 years, and we were like all the time saying that we go only for yes means yes. And I'm sure that if we would at the beginning say we are okay also with no means no, we would end up with nothing. This way we were like able, after long rounds of negotiations, to say okay, we can go for a compromise. But as us activists, if we would be like on no means no from the beginning, I'm sure there would be no change in Czech Republic.
Okay, one more question over there. Yeah, you had your hand up. No? Yes? Please. Yes. Oh, you had a question already. Okay. You first, and then, yes, we're already out of time, but this is what a good discussion takes, right?
A really quick question. So you mentioned in Czech Republic that pro-consent, there were like 72%. You mentioned 2/3. Has there been any kind of information or insight into what actually influences this consent, either pro or con? Is it family? Is it education? Is it kind of where you live? Is it age? Is it maybe social media, especially with the young people? You mentioned, young men being especially resistant. How do you see these different spheres and the role to support this consent law or work against it?
I think it's complex thing. There is like social media, there are your peers. For young people, besides schools, there's also pop culture, which is now nicely speaking about consent. I don't know if you saw Sex Education, it's much about consent. But what was interesting for me when we were looking into data, which parts of society are in favor of consent-based law or the change, the significant gap was in the middle-aged, well-educated men. They were quite a lot against, and I really don't know how to work with them. But what was interesting was that the older like 60+ men and women were like again back on track with yes and pro-consent. And I don't know how is it, but it was interesting to see.
Do you want to comment? You had an idea? No?
I think it's logical to think that the combination of different methods is something we should do. Everything, combination of everything you mentioned.
And the last question, please.
Is it? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I just wanted to correct one possible misconception that there is no sexuality education in Estonia. There is. It's not perfect. And for 7 years already, their teachers have taught already a program about healthy and safe relationship. And in this, there is also a topic of consent. And when we made a study 2 years ago, among 7 to 9 grade students, there were more than 2,000 of them in this study. And then 2/3 of them said that, yes, this topic had been handled at school. But whereas pornography was handled only by 10% of the respondents. So we made suggestions about that all the topics in the sexuality education should be handled with more thoroughness, and so there is still room for improvement, but it is not true that nothing happens in Estonia in the schools right now. No. Sometimes I hear prejudices like that, but it's not so. Yeah.
Thank you for this, and I think it does happen. I also have a daughter. I've heard that some explanations do actually happen in school, but I think they are very different, and the level is very different. How is it explained in which schools? And this is definitely something that we need to work on. All right, I cannot not take the questions, so please. But now, short questions, short answers.
So sorry for violating the time frame. Silver, I just need to ask, since you're an Estonian lawyer, practicing lawyer, so do you see any big threats to Estonian legal system that would come from yes model? Do you see a threat to a presumption of innocence or any other threats? I just need to know how practicing lawyers feel about this. Thank you.
I personally don't see, but it's my opinion. Maybe I can discuss with somebody who thinks that there is problems, but right now, right here, I'm saying I can't see.
And this is a perfect answer to finish this. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. And now we're going to watch another video, and then we'll move on to the last discussion.
Toomas, ütle ausalt, kui keeruline see teekond ohvrile täna on?
Minu isiklik kogemus ütleb, et piisavalt keeruline. Viimastel aastatel on korduvalt küsitud minu käest, et kas, kui näiteks juhtub minu tuttavaga või keegi pöördub minu poole, et kas tasub minna kohtusse õiglust nõudma, siis minu vastus viimastel aastatel eriti on pigem olnud, et pigem võib-olla mitte.
Miks?
Miks? See võib kesta väga pikalt. Ja tänane selline õiguslik regulatsioon vägistamisjuhtumite lahendamisel Eesti Vabariigis on ka mõningane selline ühiskonna arhailine hoiak. Ei ole kõige ohvrisõbralikum. Võib-olla sellepärast.
Sa oled seda kõrvalt näinud, seda teekonda. Kui pikk see siis võib olla ja püüa natuke kirjeldada lühidalt. Ma saan aru, et võtta kokku mitu aastat, paari minutist see on keeruline, aga mida see endas kätkeb ohvri jaoks?
On olnud juhtumeid tõesti, et nagu me teame tegelikult ju selline keskmine kohtulik arutamine 3-aastmelises kohtusüsteemis kestab ju aastaid. Meenutan juhtumeid, kus ohver saab õigluse esimeses astmes. Seejärel kaotab teises astmes ja siis saab õigluse Riigikohtus, kus siis Riigikohus ütleb, et tuleb minna uuesti teise astmesse. Ja seejärel sa lähed jälle sinna ja jälle sa räägid kogu seda lugu, mida sa tahad unustada, eluga edasi minna. See ei ole kerge.
Üks kord, teine kord, kolmas kord ja siis sa lähed tagasi selle sama kohtuniku juurde, kes on öelnud, et sinuga ei juhtunud seda, mis on juhtunud.
Jah, täpselt nii on, et toon siin näite, et täitsa hiljutine juhtum, kus eelnevalt karistatud vägistamise eest meesterahvas leidis enda perekonnaringist ühe sellise keerulisemas situatsioonis oleva naisterahva. Ta ujus talle külje alla. Tegid nii-öelda õhtu veinipudeli taga. Ja seal märkamatult see vägistaja sokutas ju naise klaasi GHB-d. Ja seejärel ründas naist. Esimene kohtuaste mõistis mehe vägistamises süüdi. Teine kohtuaste, rõhutan, 3 tippkohtunikku leidsid, et GHB, mida me ka suutsime tuvastada, see on ju harukordne, ei andnud põhjust väita, et seda naist oleks vägistatud. Tõsi küll, Riigikohus tegi hiljem väga kurja otsuse, kus ta põrmustas teise astme kohtu lahendi ja hiljem ringkonnakohus siis parandas oma vea ja täna vägistaja, korduv vägistaja on seal, kus tema koht on, ehk vanglas. Aga selleks kulus päris pikk aeg. Ma arvan, et nii ei tohiks olla.
Miks me ikka veel niimoodi oma ohvreid kohtleme 21. sajandil?
No eks me oleme ju ka arenenud, et millal see ju moodi tuli, kui me hakkasime rääkima lähisuhte vägivallast. Ei olnud ju väga palju aega tagasi.
No võib-olla 15 aastat.
Kas niigi palju?
Võib-olla vähem.
Et täna me arutleme selle üle, et kas meil on vajadus tulenevalt sellest, et ühiskonna areng on, et me oleme ühes teises etappi jõudnud. Kas meil on vajadus muuta vägistamiste regulatsiooni? Ma arvan, et selle aeg on küps. Miks on vaja seda regulatsiooni muuta? Täna, vähemalt mina isiklikult arvan nii, on tänu riigi sellele õiguslikule regulatsioonile vägistamisjuhtumite puhul ja sellele samale arhailisele ühiskonna hoiakule olukord, kus teatud vägistamisjuhtumite puhul me teeme ju ohvri vastutavaks. Vastutavaks selle eest, et kuidas nii juhtus, et sind vägistati. Me räägime pikalt laialt kohtusaalis sellest, millised seksuaalpartnerid vägistatul enne seda sündmust olid.
Palju neid oli.
Täpselt. Seejärel me räägime pikalt laialt, miks sellel naisel nii lühike seelik seljas oli või miks musipunane. Paneme siia jutumärgid. Alles siis me jõuame sinna, mis on äärmiselt tähtis. Miks üks 50-kilone naisterahvas ei hakanud vastu 100-kilose ründaja rünnakule? Oi jumal, see võtab väga palju aega.
Kui meil oleks nõusolekuseadus ja see oleks tehtud jah-mudeli põhiselt, kas see lahendaks kõik meie probleemid?
No karta on, et sellist päris hõbekuuli ju ka ei ole. Aga mina isiklikult arvan, et just nimelt jah-mudel, ma ei räägi ei-mudelist, ei-mudel sisuliselt ei muuda midagi. Aga jah-mudeli puhul me anname ohvrile tagasi tema väärikuse. See lihtsalt põhjusel, et me ei hakka enam rääkima sellest lühikesest seelikust või miks sa paari läksid, miks sa lasid endale välja teha või mis sa tegid või kes sa olid. Me hakkame rääkima sellest, millal ohver ütles jaa ja imelt entusiastlikult. Ma tean, et selle sõna ümber on sellist irooniat. Minu arvates on see päris asjakohane, et me anname ohvrile tagasi tema väärikuse, sest tema otsustas, kas siin ja praegu ta tahab sellega mehega seda teha või mitte. Me ei aruta selle üle, miks sa ei põgenenud.
Või miks see mees aru ei saanud, et sa äkki ei taha seda teha.
Et miks 17-aastane tütarlaps ei põgenenud oma isa venna eest, kes pakkus sellele tüdrukule libekeelselt tegelikult lihtsalt tähelepanu. Või see 14-aastane tütarlaps, kes olles juba eelnevalt väärkoheldud, lihtsalt püüdis leida endale ka inimest, kes temast hooliks, kahjuks ebaõnnestunult. Me ei räägi sellest enam tulevikus.
Aitäh, Toomas. Ma arvan, see on väga hea põhjendus.
kui me möödunud arutelus Silver Reinsaarega vestlesime, siis sa Silver püstitasid küsimuse, et see muutus sõltub sellest, kuivõrd modernne meie ühiskond täna on ja ega me vastuseni ei jõudnudki, kuivõrd modernne ta on. Aga Toomas Liiva käsitlusest mina sain küll aru, et me oleme ikkagi täna päris arhailised. Aga homme võiks olla teisiti ja sellest, kuidas homme võiks olla ja millise muutuse me peame ette võtma, milline see Eesti kurss oleks nõusolekuseaduse puhul. Sellel teemal me siis tänase päevaga kokku võtame ja ma palun siia lavale arutlema Riigikohtu kriminaalkolleegiumi esimehe Saale Laos, justiitsminister Liisa Pakosta, sotsiaalkaitseminister Signe Riisalo, Riigikogu õiguskomisjoni esimees Andre Hanimägi ja mina saan nüüd oma jalga puhata ja lavale tuleb Kersti Kaljulaid modereerima.
Nõnda, vabandage mind, ma olen nii unine, ma olen öösel magamata lennukis, isegi mikrofonid ei reageeri mu jutu peale. Aitäh, et te siin olete ja Saale, Andre, Liisa, Signe, et mis siis on see meie teekond, kuidas me selle kaardistaksime, et milline mudel siis Eestile võiks olla vajalik, et ma tegelikult siin Signe ja Liisa kehakeeltki jälgides tegelikult tean, mis see teie vaade asjal on. Ja Signe sosistas mulle ka, et tema tunneb ka üsna kindlalt, et me ju liigume ometi sinna poole. Aga mul on just värske kogemus nagu sellest, et olin Ameerikas ja Hillary Clinton ütles sellise lause, et kui ma olin 25, siis ma mõtlesin, et inimesed lihtsalt ei ole märganud, aga kohe, kui ma neile ütlen ja ilusti seletan, siis nad kõik saavad aru. Et ma kutsuks üles olema ettevaatlik ja sellepärast äkki arutame siis natuke, milline see mudel Eestile võiks olla, mis need teie vaated on. Et sa tahaks alustada, Signe, ma saan aru, ole hea.
Võin alustada küll. Et kui sa kasutad seda sõna teekond, siis teekond on olnud tegelikult hästi pikk. Ja meil on täna siin inimesi erinevatest eluvaldkondadest, kelle siis organisatsioonid või nemad ise on tohutult panustanud. Me tegelikult ju räägime naiste varjupaikadest, ohvriabist, õiguskaitsesüsteemist. 2 inimest, Tuuli ja Kristiina seal, tõesti, see on rohkem kui 15 aastat. Ja tegelikult, kui ma vaatan saalis ringi, siis seda teed on käidud pikka aega ja ma arvan, et meil on olnud väga positiivne läbimurre sellel hetkel, kui politsei võttis südameasjaks ja see sai alguse Pärnus, sellest on juba mõnda aega möödas, et see arusaam tegelikult hakkas ühiskonnas hoopis teistmoodi kerima. Et see ei olnud enam mittetulundusühingute mure, naiste varjupaikade mure, vaid see oli meie ühine mure järsku, lähisuhtevägivald ja siis ka seksuaalne väärkohtlemine. Me oleme tulnud kaugele ja teinud ka mitmeid olulisi muudatusi hiljuti oma ühiskonnas, olgu see siis seksuaalse enesemääratluse ja piiri tõstmine, koos sellega ka abiellumisiga. Et me tegelikult oleme järjest enam liikunud selles suunas, et inimesed saaksid ise siis otsustada ja et see kaitstus oleks suurem. Aspekte on hästi palju. Me räägime ennetusest, abistamisest, õiguse mõistmisest, teadlikkusest. Tegelikult neid aspekte on tohutult palju. Lisame siia juurde siis ka veel tervishoiu, psühholoogia, kogu selle poole. Pluss tegemata jäänud töötunnid, mis on ühiskonnale tegelikult väga väärtuslikud, kui nad tehtud oleksid olnud. Aga inimesed on traumadega tööturult eemal. Üks asi, mis mulle täna hästi meeldis, oli ka Kristjani püstitatud küsimus siis meeste seksuaalse väärkohtlemise kohta, aga mida ma pole täna kuulnud ja mille ma lihtsalt tahaksin õhku visata, et hõljuksin meiega koos, on tegelikult siis
erivajadustega inimeste temaatika, kus arusaamisvõime võib olla teistsugune, vaimupuue, psüühikahäire, aga tegelikult ka kõik meelepuuded või liikumisega seotud, kus inimene on abitum, haavatavam. Eraldi tahaks vanemaealiste temaatika tuua. Eile alles oli Jõhvis seminar väärkohtlemisest just vanemaealiste suunal. Ja me tegelikult teame, et nii koduseinte vahel kui, vabandust, ma lihtsalt pean ära rääkima, nii koduseinte vahel kui tegelikult ka hoolekandeasutustes meil need kahetsusväärsed juhtumid aset leiavad. Ja lõpuks, kui täna on räägitud teadlikkusest, haridusest, siis LGBTQ+ kogukonna toetamisel meil tegelikult puuduvad kompetentsid, et see nii väärkohtleja ja ohvri roll võib olla väga erinev ja me ei peaks keskenduma ainult sellele, et on lühikesed seelikuga, kuidas oli see värvitud musiga noor tütarlaps. See ei ole nii, see on palju suurem ja laiem teemade ring, mida me tegelikult peame teadvustama ja mina ei näe siis teismelise tütre emana ja 2-aastase tüdrukutirtsu vanaemana, et võiks üldse kuidagi teisiti olla kui jah-mudel. Kuidas siis teisiti? Mina ju otsustan oma keha üle. Ja see, kuidas noored tänapäeval tegelikult ka seksist avatumalt räägivad, kuidas nad sellesse suhtuvad, tänu võib-olla kooliõpetusele, aga võib-olla sotsiaalmeedia, võib-olla nende enda väärtused on teistsuguseks muutunud, siis ma arvan, et uuel põlvkonnal, kes peale kasvab, ei ole teistsugust arusaama kui jah-mudeli kasutuselevõtt. Ja siis tuleb kuidagi hakkama saada selle kihiga, kus seda arusaama veel ei ole. Ma ei tea siis, millisesse vanusesse need inimesed kuuluvad, millisesse eluvaldkonda nad kuuluvad või millisest soost nad on ja lõppeks sellel ei olegi vahet.
Jah, ja see oleks ka ealine diskrimineerimine öelda, et kõik vanainimesed arvavad, et jah-mudel on lollus. Aga Andre, ma pöördun sinu poole, et kuidas sina tajud täna parlamendis seda, et on see seal üldse teil üles tulnud see teema juba, et olete te mõelnud selle asja peale ja kui kaugele me oleme arenenud nagu sellest hetkest, kui ka Eesti parlamendis kõlas see aiu verist vorpi jätkev küsimus, et kas tõesti oma naise käest pean ka küsima?
Ja aitäh. No kõigepealt see viimane, et kas tõesti oma naise käest peab ka küsima, et kõigepealt tänud selle ürituse eest ja täna olen kindlasti mina palju targem, kui ma olin eile ja homme olen loodetavasti veelgi targem, aga tõepoolest tegelikult on ju kurb, kui on üldse tõsiselt võetaval arutelul selline küsimus püsti, et kas ma pean oma naise käest küsima või mitte. Et ma olen väga nõus selle aruteluga, mis siin enne ka oli ja mida väga paljud esinejad välja tõid, et tegelikult ju ühiskonnas jah-mudel on juba kasutuses tegelikult, et jättes välja ka sellesama nii-öelda siis, jätame välja täiesti seksuaalsuhte näiteks, siis jah-mudel kui inimesena, normaalse inimesena on täiesti normaalne mudel. Sa küsidki alati, et ma ei tea, et kas sa tahaksid teha seda, kas me läheksime sinna, lõpetades sellega, et kas me sööme õhtul näiteks seda või toda, eks ole. Et see on täiesti normaalne partneriga arvestamine, et kindlasti ühiskonnas ka praegu on jätkuvalt seda, et see on mingisugune, nagu siin välja toodi, mis on, ma saan aru, riiklikelt igal pool niimoodi, et mingi notariaalne leping. Ei ole, et see on väga normaalne inimlik käitumine. Mis on parlamendis? Jah, tõsi on see, et mitu aastat on sellest räägitud. Liisa kindlasti saab eelnõu praegusest käigust rääkida põhjalikumalt. Täna meie, kes me oleme siin lava peal tänases koalitsioonis, on koalitsioonileppes on kenasti see punkt sees, ehk siis, et me liigume sellega edasi seal koalitsioonipartnerite vahel.
Seal on sees, et nõusolekuseadus, mitte jah-mudel, eks ju.
Seal on nõusolekuseadus, jah, see on täpsustatud. Et sellega me liigume edasi ja tõsi on muidugi see, nagu siin ka ennist vist Justiitsministeeriumist üks ametnik või Siseministeeriumist arvas, et mina ei ole ka ettenägija. Aga Eestis on mõningad seadused, mis alati tekitavad väga suurt resonantsi mõningates erakondades ja mõningates ühiskonnagruppides ja ühiskonnas üldiselt. Meil on mõned praegu menetluses ja kindlasti on ka nõusolekuseadus kui selline, ma jätan praegu jah või ei mudeli välja, eks ole, nõusolekuseadus kui selline tuleb kindlasti, ütleme, väga korralik arutelu pehmelt öeldes ja jah ja ei mudeli vahel samamoodi, noh, aga see on suhteliselt loomulik protsess, nagu me kuulsime enne Saksamaal, eks ole, on üks versioon, mujal on teine. Ja siin enne ka rääkides nii-öelda seda praktikute vaadet või seda, eks ole, siis tõepoolest me peame ka mõistma seda, et vaatamata sellele, et ühiskonnas on väga selgelt minu hinnangul suuremas osas see jah-mudel juba käibel, siis kuidas seda nüüd juriidilisse keelde tõlkida niimoodi, et midagi praktikas tegelikult hakkab muutuma. Et siin enne oli ka Silveriga see arutelu, eks ole, et kas midagi muutub. Nii ja naa. Ka mina tean väga palju praktikuid, kes on väga skeptilised või vähemalt nii-öelda väga äraootaval seisukohal, milline see täpne sõnastus saab eelnõul olema. Sest tuletame veel kord, selles mõttes peame tõdema, et tõendamise koormus, süütuse presumptsioon ja kõik need kohad tegelikult ju jäävad. Ehk siis need arutelud, kuidas me nüüd mitte ainult ei muuda seaduses sõnastust, aga tõepoolest muudame ka midagi sisuliselt, midagi selles mõttes, et ühiskond saab paremini aru, et meie kohtusüsteem teeb kvaliteetseid ja häid otsuseid. Et see saab kindlasti meil olema veel päris pikk arutelu.
Aitäh, Saale. Et ma küsiks sinu käest sedasi, et kahtlemata on see jah-mudel põhineb, eks ole, nagu me täna oleme palju kuulnud, bioloogial tegelikult. Tooniline tardumus on üks asi, mis viitab nagu sellele, et võiks lihtsalt kuulata arste. Ja sealt me saame aru, et see mudel toimiks paremini. Samamoodi on öeldud, et see annab ohvrile tagasi tema eneseväärikuse ja lähtub tegelikult sellest, et me ometi respekteerime igaühe keha puutumatust. Ja samal ajal ütlevad kohtunikud paljud, et tegelikult neil ei ole vahet, kumma mudeli pealt nad seda tõendusmaterjali või otsima peavad. Ja ometigi me kuuleme, et siiski väga suur hulk kohtusüsteemi, Andresin ka ütles, et on tegelikult ikkagi skeptilised. Et miks see siis nii on, kui õiguse mõistmise seisukohast ei ole vahet, kumba väidet sa tõendad ja kõik muud asjaolud tunduvad sotsiaalsed, loodusteaduslikud rääkivad jah-mudeli kasuks. Et oskad sa natuke seda avada äkki? Kõigepealt muidugi aitäh, et sa meiega siin oled. Et sa oled kõige õigem inimene Riigikohtust siin sellel teemal rääkima. Tere tulemast.
Aitäh küsimuse eest ja ma ei tea, kas ma olen kõige õigem, sest mul 3 kolleegi täna just arutasid ühte 2 astmes õigeks mõistetud vägistamissüüdistuse asja, nii et nemad on tunduvalt rohkem praegu asjaga tegelevad kui mina, aga tänan tõesti kutse eest ja ma ise kasutan seda võimalust siin nii-öelda ka õppida ja kuulda just välismaa kolleegide kogemusi, põhjendusi, miks nemad valisid ühe või teise mudeli. Ma ütlen kohe alguses ära, et mul ei ole kindlat siseveendumust, kumb mudel oleks õigem. See väga palju sõltub ka sellest sõnastusest, mis paika saab pandud ja nagu siin tegelikult ka videos eksperdid juba ütlesid, et kõiki tõendamisprobleeme ei lahenda ei üks ega teine mudel, et sellised elulised raskused tõendamisel jäävad absoluutselt alles. Aga kui küsimus oli selles, et miks praktikutel võib olla hirm selle jah-mudeli ees, siis ma olen nüüd 2 nädalat selle teemaga üritanud ennast kurssi viia. Ja ma olen aru saanud või juristina, õigusteadlasena on mul jäänud selline mulje, et lähtekoht on see, et jättes isegi Istanbuli konventsioon nagu kõrvale, kust meil see kohustus tuleb, me ühiskonnana loomulikult oleme nii kaugele jõudnud, et jah, mudel iseenesest igapäevases elus peaks kehtima. Nüüd on küsimus see, et mida me selle nõusolekuna, aktiivse jahina, on see siis verbaalne, on see siis konkludentne, käitumuslik, kuidagi edasi, kuidas me seda nii-öelda siis tõendama hakkama ehk need elulised raskused, mis tekivad. Et ma toon 2 näidet, mis ma olen nagu kirjandust lugedes, mis mind on mõtlema pannud. Siin oli küsimus, et kas elukaaslast saab vägistada ja loomulikult saab, et see ei ole absoluutselt küsimus, aga ma suunaks mõttekäigu sinna, et mis asi on nõusolek. On pikaajaline kooselu suhe 2 partneril. Ma proovin, et ma ei libastu siin soo teemal, et võib olla mõlemad pidi. ja üks partneritest ei tunne nii-öelda himu. Aga ta saab aru, et teine partner võiks olla õnnelik, kui ta läheks kaasa ja toimub seksuaalvahekord. Aga mees selle asemel, et panna, vabandust, juba nii läkski stereotüübid, otsustab partner, ei pane peale nii-öelda vana plaati, vaid proovib midagi uut. Aga naine on passiivne. Kas ta on nõus või ta ei ole? Millega ta on nõus? Kuhu maani ta on nõus? Kõik need sellised küsimused tegelikult selle jah-mudeliga tekivad teatud piirsituatsioonides, mida Saksa kolleeg oma ettekandes ka välja tõi, et teatud piirsituatsioonides me võime jõuda selleni, et inimesed on segaduses, mida siis võib, mida mitte. Väga selgetel juhtudel, kus rünnak, nimetame seda siis rünnakuks ja tahtevastaseks seksuaalvahekorraks, see on ootamatu, kannatanu ei saa reageerida. Olukord on nagu selge, aga päris elus tuleb ette ka olukordi, kus selle jahi väljendamine võib viia olukordadeni, kus me küsime, et kas me siis tahame, et see oleks kuritegu või mitte. Ja just läbi selle, et mis asi see nõusolek on. Et see on üks näide. Teine näide võiks olla nõusolekust ka see, et milleks me siis nõusoleku anname. Et kui ma olen kellegiga konsensuslikus vahekorras ja arvan, et ta ei kanna mingisugust nakkust, aga tegelikult ta kannab. Kui ma oleks seda teadnud, ma ei oleks nõusolekut andnud. Kas see on siis vägistamine jah-mudeli kaudu? Et ühesõnaga me peaksime läbi mõtlema need piirsituatsioonid, et kuriteoks ei muutuks midagi, mida me ei taha, et see seal oleks. Ehk sellised teatud eeldused või situatsioonid, mis tuleks väga selgelt läbi mõelda.
Kas ei-mudeli korral muutuks midagi nende sinu 2 näite käsitlemises?
Ma ei oska niimoodi analüüsi pakkuda, aga küll oleks minu soovitus eelnõu ja VTK väljatöötajatele, et võib-olla tasuks võtta praktikast või teiste riikide kogemusest need olukorrad, kus võib-olla siis kas õiglustunne või nimetame õiglustunne piiripealses situatsioonis, kus ütleme siis kohtud on kas õigeks mõistnud või asi ei ole üldse kohtusse jõudnud, kas jah või ei mudeli korral oleks see tulemus teine. Ja see võiks olla teatud selline praktiline indikatsioon näitamaks, et kus see probleem siis õiguse mõistmise olukorras olla võib, aga arusaadavalt meil on kuriteo puhul tuleb eristada objektiivset ja subjektiivset külge ehk seda toimepanija tahtlust. Ehk kuidas seda nõusolekut, see, kellele me seda ette heidame, ta sellest ka aru saaks. Ehk see nõusoleku andmine teatud elulistes situatsioonides võib probleeme tekitada nii ei kui jah puhul. Aga viimane kommentaar oleks see, et me räägime siin küll ainult vägistamisest, mis siis nõuab nii-öelda penetratsiooni, aga tegelikult on ju kogu seksuaalvägivald ei pruugi olla nii-öelda vägistamine ja Istanbuli konventsioon ju räägib ka laiemalt. Et seda võiks silmas pidada.
Liisa, ma saan aru, et nüüd sinul on see raske ülesanne sõnastada siis jah-mudel niimoodi, et inimesed ei tunneks seda mingi jõhkra ofensiinina ühiskonna normaalse toimimise suhtes. Et kuidas sa sellega kavatsed toime tulla, et see saaks niimoodi sõnastatud, nüansseeritult, leebelt, et inimesed saaksid aru, et see tegelikult on täiega okei, et me ei teeks nagu sellist PR-viga selle drafti kirjutamises. Oled sa mõelnud üldse selle peale?
Tarvitses sul ainult küsida, kui juba läks signalisatsioon taga tööle. Ma ka tänan kõigepealt selle ürituse korraldamise eest, et tõesti on olnud väga huvitav ja just erinevate riikide ja erinevaid aspekte kuulata. Väga suur tänu selle eest. Ma ütlen ka alguses ka ära, et minule tundub see asi üsna lihtne jah-mudeli poolt olles, et ma vaatan sellele asjale enam-vähem niimoodi, et mul on seal tooli peale jäi käekott ja kui keegi nüüd praegu võtab selle käekotti ja läheb sellega minema, ilma et ma oleksin sellele suuremat nagu vastuseisu avaldanud, siis ma arvan, et tegelikult see ei ole okei. Et kui nüüd ma päris hästi ei näe, naeratan kellegile ja lehvitan ja ütlen, et ja. No siis ma isegi, kui ma valesti aru sain sellest olukorrast, aga no ikkagi mulle tundub, et siis ma olen andnud nõusoleku, et ma olen inimlikult nõus aru saama, et ma nagu teine pool tõesti võis minu aktiivsest käitumisest seda aru saada. Ja ma päriselt arvan, et naine ei ole kehvem kui kott. Et selles mõttes see tundub mulle väga lihtne. Ja ühe remargi ma teeksin veel enne, kui ma hakkan sellele väga lihtsale küsimusele vastama. Et siiski mul on 2 kõrgharidust, esimene on ajaloost ja ma siiski kutsuksin üles mitte rõhuma sellele, et on olemas modernne ja arhailine lahendus. Nagu me teame, Eestis on olnud matrilineaarne ühiskond, ehk siis Eestis ja Islandil on olnud siis naiste võim. Ja me teame ka ju ajalooallikatest, et isegi päris orised talunaised andsid mõisniku kohtusse, kui see neile üritas vastu nende tahtmist seksuaalselt läheneda. Ka sellised kohtuasjad on säilinud. Nii et pigem see arusaam, et kuskil on mingi hea tüdruku kuvand, kes peab olema madalam kui muru, tuleb meile tegelikult alles siis mitte viimasest, aga eelmisest sajandi vahetusest, kus siis meile jõudis suur hulk saksa kirjandust ja muud kahtlast kraami. Aga see siis selliseks nagu vahepalaks. Nüüd, kuidas seda teha? Et ma arvan, et kõige õigem on seda seaduseelnõu teha niimoodi, nagu me oleme Eestis kokku leppinud, et on hea seadusi teha. Ja kui siis ka ei õnnestu, siis on mingid muud asjad süüdi, aga see hea seaduse tegemine näeb niimoodi välja, et kõigepealt ühiskonnas ikkagi seda küsimust tõstatatakse ja arutatakse hästi palju. See tänane üritus on ka üks osa sellest hea seaduse tegemise etapist, nii et ma veel kord väga tänan. Ja nende arutelude käigus tulevad välja siis erinevad vaated, erinevad seisukohad, mis on igaüks tegelikult ikkagi väärtuslik. Sellepärast, et kui inimesel selline arvamus on, me ei saa öelda, et see on nüüd täiesti väärtusetu, et inimestel on õigus oma arvamusi öelda, oma seisukohti välja tuua ja ka see on ikkagi ühiskonnas väga oluline. Seejärel pannakse kokku väljatöötamiskavatsus. Ja väljatöötamiskavatsus siis selgitab kõigepealt ära selle probleemi olemuse ja pakub sellele, nüüd ma rõhutan, erinevaid lahendusvariante. Ehk et see, kui Justiitsministeeriumist tuleb väljatöötamiskavatsus, mis pakubki ühele probleemile nii jah-mudeli kui ei-mudeli lahendusvariandiks, on iseloomulik heale väljatöötamiskavatsusele, sest meil on õigusaktides õntes ka kirjas, et väljatöötamiskavatsus peabki pakkuma erinevaid variante ja ta peab välja tooma nende variantide plussid ja miinused. Ehk siis selles olukorras see hea väljatöötamiskavatsus toob välja mõlema variandi võimalikud plussid ja võimalikud miinused. Ja nüüd ühiskond selle kristalliseeritud esiteks probleemikirjeldus ja siis vähemalt 2 erinevat lahendusvarianti. Nüüd ühiskond hakkab sellele kaasa rääkima. Kõik teie, kes te siin praegu olete ja kõik, kes meid Delfi vahendusel kuulavad, kõik saadavad siis oma arvamusi, et minu arvates on niimoodi õige ja minu arvates on niimoodi õige ja vot see asi teil on jäänud tähelepanuta ja siis loodetavasti veel Riigikohus ka kirjutab meile veel, millised nüansid on jäänud tähelepanuta. Ja see ongi selle väljatöötamiskavatsuse ühiskondliku arutelu mõte. Ja seejärel siis tõesti tuleb teha see otsus. Ma väga loodan, et siis kõik need arvamused, võib-olla mitte kõik, aga enamik neid arvamusi ikkagi toetab seda jah-mudelit ja pärast seda siis läheb eelnõu kõigepealt tarka valitsusse ja seejärel veel ülemuste juurde Riigikokku. Ja siis järgneb juba ülemuste juures Riigikogusse arutelu. Aga niimoodi tehes ma loodan ellu jääda.
Aitäh, Liisa. Niimoodi sa jääd kindlasti ellu, selles ma ei kahtle, aga mul siiski väike nõks küsimus tekkis. Võib-olla Signe tahad seda ka kommenteerida, et vaata tegelikult ikkagi ei tule näiteks, kui Justiitsministeerium teeb meile seda seadust, kas tappa võis või tappa ei võinud, eks ole, ja see sama kotivarguse näide. Sa ei tule sealt 2 variandiga. Et võib-olla ei karista, aga võib-olla karistame. See tuleb 1 variandiga. Meil on nagu mingisugune, ütleme, arusaam meie ühiskonnas, et nii ei tehta või nii tehakse, eks ole. Ja sa ei tule 2 variandiga üldse välja.
Minu arust seal tuleks ikkagi ära näidata ja mõlema variandi puhul need plussid ja miinused. Ja tuleb olla aus. Ütleme, et kui sa jätad nagu mingisugused riskikohad, mida tegelikult ju riigikohtunik Saale Laos ka natuke välja tõi, et seal on küsimusi, mida tulebki ausalt rääkida. Ja mida rohkem on seal selgelt ja ausalt ära räägitud, et niimoodi on niipidi ja niimoodi on naapidi, no see peaks olema nagu üheselt arusaadav. Ma võin selle kotilooga sinna eelnõusse või VTK eelnõusse sisse kirjutada, et oleks eriti arusaadav.
Selgituskirja.
Signe, sinu kord ja siis lõppsõna jääb nagu ikka Riigikogule, nii see kord on juba siin riigis.
Ja ma tegelikult oleks tahtnud ka öelda, et väljatöötamiskavatsuse, hea väljatöötamiskavatsus annab meile valikud hästi selgelt. Ja minu meelest tänane päev on olnud hästi selge. Ja ma võtaks kokku ainult Karolinska ülikooli uuringu tulemusega, kui 70 ei-mudeli puhul ei saa võimalustki, et ennast kaitsta, siis millest me räägime?
Mind veenis see ka just neid videoid tehes täpselt samamoodi see, et see on bioloogiline, see ei ole juriidiline probleem, sõbrad, vabandust. Hea küll, Saale ja siis Andre, ole hea.
Seekord väga lühidalt, aitäh sulle. Tegelikult ju meil praegu ka seaduses on abitusseisund, ehk kus ei eeldatagi ohvrilt aktiivset käitumist. Küsimus, kuidas me seda sisustame?
Andre.
Ja, et ma pean ka natuke tulenevalt vist ka oma ametikohast kaitsma, et kindlasti ei ole Eesti kohtusüsteemi või kohtunike selline arusaam kuidagi arhailine või vähemalt väga paljudel või enamusel ei ole kindlasti see niimoodi. Et küsimus taandub väga palju ikkagi kriminaalõiguse selliste põhipostulaatidele, et nagu siin ka enne oli juttu, olgu see süütuse presumptsioon või see sama juba mitusada aastat vana põhimõte, mis paraku tekitab eriti sellistes raskestes juhtumites nagu vägistamine on neid kohti, kus ühiskond hoiab peast kinni ja loomulikult on ohver traumatiseeritud ja see ongi see sama loogika, eks ole, et parem 10 süüdlast pääseb, kui üks süütu jääb süüdi, et kriminaalõiguses on mingisugused asjad, millega ka Riigikohus peab pidevalt tegelema, kuigi me ühiskonnana tegelikult ju saame aru, mis on see õige tee, vähemalt need inimesed, kes vähegi on mingisuguse sotsiaalse tunnetusega ja ülesehitusega. Aga mida siit kaasa võtta on, ma arvan kindlasti see, et hirme peame me vähendama. Mingisugust, see tänane üritus oli selle algus. Kindlasti peab neid üritusi ja diskussioone olema veel, sest jätkuvalt, ma usun, et ka selles samas Delfi otseülekande kommentaariumis on kindlasti mõned kommentaarid notariaalsest lepingust või siis muudest viitamistest, et millega me siin üldse tegeleme, et me siin räägime täiesti mingit jama, eks ole, et kindlasti seda on ja kindlasti seda jääb, aga me peame siinkohal ikkagi seda tööd veel tegema. Ja ütleme, minu nägemus on ikkagi see, et me liigume sellega edasi koostöös ühiskonnaga tervikuna, arvestame kõiki neid murekohti, loomulikult adresseerime neid, räägime, miks need murekohad tegelikult ei vasta tõele, nii nagu ka siin täna oli, ütleme see süütuse presumptsiooni jutt kas või, eks ole, ka siin täna öeldi, et vabandust, et nii ei kui jah mudeli puhul tegelikult seda küsimust ei eksisteeri. Aga ma pean tunnistama, et ka mina, kui ma ka valmistusin täna, eks ole, siin lava peal olema, ka mina uurisin seda nii praktikute käest, vaatasin, kuidas pidi see on. Ja see on, ma arvan, täiesti loomulik, et me viimegi ennast asjadega kurssi. Nii et kui me ühiskonnana tegelikult oleme valmis ja ma arvan, et me oleme valmis, siis küll me tuleme ka juriidiliselt sellele järgi.
Ma igaks juhuks ütlen vahele, et kirjalikku lepingut ei tule sinna VTK-sse, et ühiskond võib olla täiesti rahulik.
Selge. Ja mina tahaks, muidugi meil on siin valdavalt poliitikud, mistõttu meil on ammu aeg otsas, mistõttu püüdke nad nööbist kinni ja küsige nüüd eraldi, enne kui nad minema jooksevad. Et on seal küsimusi juba, no selge, nii.
Tere, aitäh! Nelefe ministeeriumist. Ma saan aru, et on väljatöötamiskavatsus käsil töös ja ma tahaksin uurida, kasutada võimalust uurida, et milline on ajajoon ja mis seis sellega. Aitäh!
Aitäh, vastan kiiresti, et 17. oktoobril on järgmine suur kaasamisüritus. See ei ole esimene, see on juba päris mitmes siin praegu. Ja väljatöötamiskavatsuse tähtaeg on 14. detsember 2024 ja seaduse eelnõu valmimine eelduslikult kevadel 2025.
Aitäh, järgmine küsimus, sealt palun.
Ma tahtsin lihtsalt, mina olen Annika Silde, Sotsiaalkindlustusamet ja seksuaalvägivalla ohvrite tugiteenused. Tahtsin lihtsalt täiendada, natukene lisada juurde numbreid. See tähendab seda, et kas me oleme arhailised või kas me oleme ühiskonnana valmis. Meil oli just alles hoiakutega seotud uuring. See on avalikult kättesaadav, saab vaadata. Mis te arvate, mis see protsent oli seal, kes ütlesid, et kui ei ole mõlema osapoole nõusolekut, siis tegu on vägistamisega? Pakkuge, mis see number võis olla? Mitu inimest arvas, et tegu on siis vägistamisega?
Ei tea, ütle.
81%. 81% Eesti elanikest arvab, et kui ei ole mõlema osapoole nõusolekut, on tegu vägistamisega. Seal ei olnud erisusi meeste, naiste suhtes, erinevusi isegi mitte väga vanuseliselt. Seega, ma arvan, et me oleme väga valmis ja palun teeme selle jah-mudeli ära.
Aitäh, ma arvan, sellega ongi väga kohane lõpetada ja õnneks olen ma ise alati selle koolkonna esindaja olnud, et poliitik on selline lihtne olend, et teeb, mida rahvas tahab. Aitäh. See oli väga hea kokkuvõte.
Aitäh teile. Ma pean tunnistama, et harva on olnud poliitikuid nii huvitav kuulata. Et aitäh selle sisuka ja tegelikult ka väga julgustava vestluse eest. Et minul igal juhul tekkis natukene suuremus kui enne seda. Aga vaatame, kuidas edasi ja kas need kuupäevad peavad paika, millest Liisa meile ka just rääkis. Aga mul on nüüd teile selline küsimus. Siin ruumis on palju eksperte koos, kes ühel või teisel moel on ka teemaga seotud. Kas kellelgi tundub, et midagi olulist on täna jäänud ütlemata? Kas mõni selline nurk, neid pimenurkasid on omajagu, on jäänud avamata? Või kas keegi tahab peegeldada mõnda mõtet? Ja Egert Belitšev, politsei peadirektor, ole hea.
Ja ma võib-olla peegeldaksin mõne mõtet. Ma tulin hommikul siia, aitäh esiteks selle ürituse eest. Ma tulin hommikul siia teatud mõttega. Ja ma sain siit ka seda veendumust juurde, aga mis see mõte oli see, et kui ma ise enda käest küsin, et kas Eestil on vaja seda nõusolekuseadust, siis ma ei saa aru, et miks me peaks arutama selle üle. Ma ei saa aru sellepärast, et kui ma mõtlen nagu politsei töö peale, kui ma mõtlen kõikide kuritegude peale, mida Eestis tehakse ja kus on meil koosseisud, siis enamike koosseisude puhul me ei räägi sellest, et eeltingimus peab olema vägivald. Ja enamike koosseisude puhul see vägivald on kvalifitseeriv tingimus, mis teeb asja hullemaks. Et miks peaks vägistamise puhul olema see eeltingimus vägivald? Ja teine küsimus on see, et jah või ei, et kas meil läheme ei-süsteemi peale või jah-süsteemi peale. Mul on hea meel, et Liisa tegelikult ka sellele osutas, aga enamikes koosseisudes me oleme Eestis jah-süsteemis. Kui me räägime kuritegudest, me oleme jah-süsteemis. Kui keegi saab tänaval räigelt peksa, siis ei lähe politsei tema juurde ja küsi, et kas sa ütlesid talle ei? Või sa unustasid selles protsessis selle ei ütlemata? Samamoodi on autovargusega, et kui sult varastatakse auto ära, siis politsei ei tule ohvri käest küsima, et kuule, kas ei oli peale kirjutatud autole? Ja miks nagu niivõrd rohkem inimese põhiõigustesse ja niivõrd palju räigem kuriteoliik, kui seda on vägistamine, peaks olema kuidagi teistmoodi. Et seal me ütleme, et igal juhul peab karjuma avalikult ja valjusti ei. Ehk siis mis on minu sõnum on see, et ma arvan, et me ei tohiks ühiskonnana seda nõusolekuseadust müstifitseerida. See on midagi sellist, et nüüd me oleme alati toas kolmekesi ja notar on kõrval ja peab kõik fikseerima. See on väga libe tee, et me ei tohiks seda teha ja vaatame, kuidas me nagu teistes kuriteokoosseisudes käitume ja teeme selle puhul täpselt samamoodi. Ja siis on üks asi veel. Ma vaatan seda saali ja mul on üks mure. Mul on üks mure siis politseijuhi, abikaasa ja isana. Ja see mure on selles, et ma arvan, et Eestis me ei tohiks seda teemat jätta naiste teemaks. Ehk siis, et tegelikkuses me peaksime sellest tegema meeste teema, sest meheks olemise põhialus on julgus ja oskus küsida oma partneri käest, mida tema tahab.
Aitäh. Riina Sikkut, ole hea.
Ja aitäh. Egertiga täiesti nõus. Arutelu on vajalik, sest me oleme neid teemasid vähe arutanud ühiskonnas ja tõesti vähe defineerinud, et mis see nõusolek siis on. Aga minu seisukoht on samasugune, et see jah-põhine mudel on tegelikult ainus, mida peaks rakendamas, sest see vastab tervetele ja tervislikele suhetele. Lisaks kogu selle autovarguse paralleelid ja kõik, mis on, et kui me tõesti teiste küsimuste puhul ei eelda, et sa pead karjuma ei, et teised saaksid aru, mida sa päriselt soovid. Me igas teises valdkonnas suhtleme teistmoodi ja nüüd vägistamine ei saa olla kuidagi erand. Et sobib meie üldisesse suhtlusstiili, õigusruumi, jah-põhine mudel. Ja nüüd 2 kommentaari. Et kuna eestlane on ikkagi praktilise meelega praegusel kärpeajastul tegelikult sobib, siis üks argument, mis ei ole läbi käinud, et igasuguse muutuse tegemine, näiteks ka ei-põhisele mudelile üleminek, see nõuab väga suuri kulusid, koolitusi, nii politsei, prokuratuur, kohus, aga võib-olla ka tervisesüsteem, koolid, haridusvaldkond. Seda pingutust ja kulu on mõtet kanda siis, kui me saavutame päris muutuse. Seda on mõtet tegelikult teha ainult jah-mudeli saavutamiseks, et see rakendada. Kõik muu on raiskamine, sest päris muutust ei tule. Ja minu meelest Saale kirjeldatud juhtum oli ka väga värvikas ja tuleb ka selle üle arutada. Aga kui seda tüüpi juhtumid jõuavad kohtusse, on seal suhtes palju rohkem valesti kui üks mittenõusolekupõhine seksuaalvahekord. Et siis me saame rääkida pereteraapiast ja teistest sekkumitest, mida tuleks rohkem võimaldada inimestele, et omavahelises suhtluses piirid, õppida piiride seadmist, kokkulepete tegemist. Need pingutada tuleb ka teistes valdkondades ja lõpuks need piiripealsed juhtumid ei peakski kohtusse jõudma. Aitäh.
Aitäh, Riina. Ma kuulan nii Riinat kui ka Egertit ja eelnevaid arutlejaid ja mul on ikkagi tunne, Liisa, et see väljatöötamiskavatsus, et see vajab riskianalüüsi juurde, aga et seal peaks ikkagi olema ainult üks mudel ettepanekuna. Jah, mudel. Lihtsalt võtta sa siit kaasa täna. Meil on veel üks küsimus. You wanted to ask a question? Yes, please. Can we have a microphone here?
Thank you. My name is Iffy from the British Embassy. It wasn't a question. You asked the question that I wanted to respond. You said, or you asked whether there was something that was missing from today. And I think it's been a really, really interesting conversation. And I think following on from what the head of police said here, I think something that has been missing is our own personal and collective responsibility to do the awareness raising. So we've talked here about schools and so on and so forth, and we've just heard about how expensive this could be, but we all have individual responsibilities to educate. And so for me as a mother, I have 2 sons, one who's 23 and one who's 17. And I also have a daughter. I talk to my sons more than I do my daughter about this issue. So I just wanted to emphasize that we all have a personal responsibility to educate those who are around us, regardless of their age, the young, the old, the middle-aged, whatever. Personal responsibility, and I think that's something that maybe I missed hearing today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you are absolutely right, because, it starts from an individual, the way we think and the way we behave. And then it goes back to homes, right? This is where we get our very first level of education and the values in our lives. So we have a lot of work to do. Thank you for that. On veel küsimusi? Any more questions? Any more thoughts? Tundub, et me oleme jõudnud oma aruteluga sinna punkti, et paneks kohe hääletusele. ja võtaks vastu ja siis oleks rahu majas ja siis me saame harimisega tegeleda. Aga nagu ma oma avasõnades ka ütlesin, meil on õigusriik ja selle taga on teatav protsess, mis tuleb läbi käia ja see arutelu siin peab minema palju laiemale erinevates ühiskonnagruppides ja kohe päris kindlasti Tallinnast välja. Ja kui me need arutelud ära peame, siis ma väga loodan, et tol hetkel, kui see debatt jõuab parlamenti järgmisel kevadel, siis see saab olema üks isiklikul vastutusel põhinev ja arukas arutelu. Nii et jah, mudeli poolt. Aitäh teile tänase eest. Ja lõpusõnadeks, Taavi, sa tahad lavale tulla või? Ma tean, et Hanna-Liisa tahtis...
Aitäh Annikale terve selle päeva vedamise eest ka.
Jaa, aga üks aitäh veel. Tule nüüd lavale ka. Jaa, et inimene, kes vastutab selle eest, et kogu see sisu siin kokku pandi, on
aitäh,
minu kõrva.
Et mul on nii suur rõõm olla sellest seltskonnast, kes vastutab selle eest, et see tänane üritus juhtus ja ma tõesti loodan, et see oli konstruktiivne, et Eestis saaks seksuaalvägivalla ohver õiguskaitse ja suhtumise, mis teda päriselt aitaks ja toetaks. Et ma usun ja tunnen, olles ka 6 aastat töötanud ohvriabis eluohtlike juhtumitega, et see on üks kõige laastavamaid kuritegusid üldse, mis eksisteerib ja sellel on üle põlvkondade kestev tagajärg, nii et on põhjust leida parimad lahendid. Olles ise mudeli pooldaja ka muidugi, aga tegelikult ma tahtsin lihtsalt tänada kõiki neid osapooli, kes täna konkreetselt selle ürituse juhtumisse on panustanud ja lisaks kõik teised, kes siin on saalis ja kes on 10 aastat kultiveerinud juba seda teemat ja seda rada. Aga jah, et aitäh president Kaljulaidi fondi tiim, aitäh Kersti, aitäh Taavi, aitäh Triin Adamson, Mattias, Triin Väljataga, Kristi, Grete-Maria, kõik, kes on nii palju panustanud. Aitäh Feministeeriumile, aitäh Eliisele, kes on nii sirge seljaga ja jõuliselt läbi seinte läinud ja tegelikult läbi ühe seinaga meie juurde jõudnud 8 kuud tagasi, kui me hakkasime koos seda üritust siin ette valmistama. Aitäh kõikidele suurepärastele esinejatele nende praktikate eest. Aitäh mõnel esinejale alles mõni päev tagasi julge mehena punti hüppamast, Silver, aitäh, et tulid. Ja üldse polnud lihtne siia esinejaid leida, et inimesed on pelglikud selle teema ees, aga ma arvan, et me läksime palju rohkem lahti kui varem. Kas keegi jäi veel tänamata? Aitäh Kai Part, Toomas Liiva, aitäh sulle, endine prokurör 30-aastase kogemusega. Jälgib meid kuskilt reisilt Delfist praegu ja kõik teised. Meie head toetajad, et tõesti meil on selline õnnelik võimalus, et kõik saatkonnad, kelle targad pead on täna siin, kelle riikidest tulevad targad pead on täna siin saalis, on toetanud meid ka rahaliselt ja lisaks ka muidugi teadmistega. Ja aitäh ja sisukaid ja konstruktiivseid arutelusid siis Eesti ühiskonnas.